One of the primary aims of the SCP Foundation is to contain the anomalies that they discover. Secure, contain, protect is their mission statement after all. However, there are some forces so unknowable and malevolent that there is no way to truly contain them. SCP-4205 is one such force. Very little is known about SCP-4205, even compared to other SCPs, many of which are mysterious by their very nature. We do not know what it is, we do not know what it wants, and we do not have any meaningful way to stop it. The best that can be done to protect yourself from it is to implement the few known preventative measures available and pray that it doesn't set its sights on you. The little information that exists on SCP-4205 was recorded by Wade Dalitz, a former junior researcher at the Foundation. He wrote the initial report on SCP-4205 on a computer, Terminal 4. Though his work was highly valuable and provided many previously unknown insights about the nature of the SCP, sadly his knowledge could not save him. The official entry on SCP-4205 was his final act before his death on December 11th, 1992. Before we get deeper into that entry and Wade's final day on Earth, it's important to understand what SCP-4205 is, or at least understand the little we know about what it is. 4205 is a Keter-class SCP, meaning that it's incredibly difficult or complicated to contain. It also shows extreme hostility toward all life. It is described as an amber-colored pair of human-like eyes, with the ability to appear spontaneously in windows, mirrors, or any other glass or glass-like surface. One of the reasons so little is known about these eyes is that anyone who sees them dies within seconds. Much like the mythical basilisk, the gaze of SCP-4205 is deadly and inescapable. The eyes only seem to appear to people who are alone in a room, and never in places where there's more than one person. But aside from that, there is no way to predict where the eyes will appear. Since it is unknown if the eyes are part of a corporeal body or even present on this plane of reality, there is no way to contain them or stop them from killing. This brings us to that fateful day, December 11th, 1992. The day that the SCP Foundation would finally be given some tangible information on the mysterious amber eyes, at the cost of one of their researchers' lives. Wade Dalitz, a young man fresh out of his university studies, was brought on board as a junior researcher by Dr. Mark Forsyth, a senior researcher. Dr. Forsyth recruited Wade after giving a guest lecture at his university, and being impressed by Wade's keen observational skills, thirst for knowledge of the unexplained, and determination to understand that which seemed to defy explanation. After Wade graduated, he was recruited by Dr. Forsyth and given the position of junior researcher at the SCP Foundation, where he assisted Dr. Forsyth, now a site supervisor, in his research. After several months of working under Dr. Forsyth with minimal responsibilities, Wade was finally given the opportunity to write his first SCP report on SCP-4205. Following some initial documented appearances of 4205, Dr. Forsyth approved further research into the anomaly, with Wade appointed as the lead researcher on the subject. According to Wade's entry, he was responsible for the discovery of SCP-4205 when he spotted the anomaly in a window. Though later reviews of security footage determined that he was not the first person to observe the eyes, he did claim to be the first to observe them and live to tell the tale. In his writing on the subject, Wade is puzzled by the fact that he survived his encounter with SCP-4205 and wonders what could have set him apart from the others that fell victim to its gaze. He found himself frustrated as he documented SCP-4205, his rough drafts of reports dissolving into angry rants about his own incompetence. Wayne had difficulty adjusting to his new responsibilities, especially with the added element of his assigned subject's mysterious and volatile nature. In between his reports on SCP-4205, its previous appearances, and its effects on its victims, he wrote letters to his father, desperate for reassurance that he was not messing everything up, letters that would sadly go unsent. In his coverage of SCP-4205, Wade made note of a troubling reoccurring element in each victim's death. When medical professionals attempted to revive the victims, it was always noted that their brain activity stopped much more quickly than in cases of death by natural causes. When examined, all aspects of the body aside from the brain were completely unharmed. The brain, however, showed massive nerve damage in the amygdala, hippocampus, medial temporal lobe, and occipital lobe. The appearance of this brain trauma had been compared to the effects of electrical shock or a severe head injury. In addition to Wade, 6 other people on record encountered SCP-4205. Every encounter ended the same way, with sudden brain death and severe nerve damage immediately after viewing the eyes in a reflective surface. The first encounter occurred on January 5, 1990, when Deputy Liaison Gaea viewed the eyes in a reflective glass one-way window. Security tape reveals that the eyes appeared in the window 8 minutes before the Deputy Liaison spotted them. As soon as he did, he fell from his chair and immediately died. Though the specifics varied from case to case, the end result of every encounter was the same, with none surviving long enough to relate what they had experienced, every encounter except Wade's. As he continued his documentation of SCP-4205, Wade's mental state quickly began to deteriorate, the process of his mind coming apart, and his thoughts giving way to confusion, fear, and anger at his own survival is documented in his reports on the SCP. He agonized over the questions of why he was able to survive gazing into the eyes of SCP-4205 when so many others had not. The question consumed him until he was unable to eat, sleep, or do anything but obsess over the SCP he was tasked with researching. As he became more agitated, he began to write about the eyes appearing to him again. On one occurrence, he attempted to touch them, and described the sensation like touching a balloon to your arm after it had been charged with static electricity. He continued to report seeing the eyes. The worst was when trying to sleep, during which he was overtaken by violent sleep paralysis and plagued with visions of the amber eyes. The only comfort Wade seemed to find was in memories of his loved ones. He wrote about his mother and his father, even as their memories grew foggier to him. He also mentioned a man by the name of Theodore Quayle, who he claimed was a researcher at the Foundation. Later fact-checking determined that this was not the case, and that Quayle must have been someone from Wade's past. He wrote about Quayle wistfully, mournfully, with words of love and loss, tormented by the sense that he was losing his grip on reality and everything he once held dear. As Wade descended deeper into a hell inside his own mind, he continued to mull over the questions of SCP-4205. Was there more to it than what was visible? Did it have a body? Why had he survived the encounter with it? And what did it want from him? He decided that those who had perished immediately were the lucky ones. They had escaped the torture that had overtaken his life. The eyes were everywhere now, watching him even as he attempted to unlock their secrets on a Foundation computer. He spoke to the eyes at one point, but refused to write down what they said to him. His last entry, his last thought, was a plea for Theodore Quayle's embrace. There is no more written about the research or about the eyes, only a simple, desperate need for a comfort that is long lost. Now is the part of our story where terror meets tragedy. Contrary to what Wade thought, and what was recorded in his final computer entries, he did not survive his brief brush with SCP-4205. The truth is that he spotted the amber eyes in the glass above his terminal monitor while recording the entry and died seconds later. Though his death was swift, it felt agonizingly slow, as revealed by his descent into panic and paranoia recorded in his writings. The entries recorded as a result of the connection Wade in the computer, his physical contact with it at the moment of exposure to SCP-4205's anomalous effects, allowing the terminal to archive his final thoughts before he succumbed to the deadly nature of the eyes. The entries were never physically typed, but rather jumped from his dying mind into the mainframe. His entries, the echoes of a dying mind, offer a glimpse into the way that SCP-4205 kills its victims. In the seconds leading up to death, the amber eyes fast-forward a person's mind, feeding on the electrical impulses that it gives off as it speeds through what seems to be days of fear and of a loosening grip on reality. The death may be swift, but the suffering is long. Wade left the Foundation with a digital fingerprint, an echo of the person he was at his core, in addition to his experiences with SCP-4205 itself. Wade spent his final moments terrified for his life, dreaming of a father that he missed and a long-lost love from his college days. His sacrifice must not be forgotten, because no one ever survives an encounter with SCP-4205. His documented final moments are the only first-hand account in existence. Junior researcher Wade Dalitz gave us a gift in death. He allowed the SCP Foundation a glimpse into the true horror of the amber eyes and a reminder of what they are capable of stealing from us. So be careful of windows, mirrors, screens, and all reflective surfaces. When you look into them, you never know what you might see. There's no shortage of graffiti in most downtowns. From simple tags to intricate murals, it can be found in almost any alley, underpass, and subway tunnel. To most people who live and work there, it all blends into the background. But one piece of street art isn't so easy to ignore, since unlike most graffiti, this one is animated. John Freeman, an unassuming man in his mid-20s, was out late one night in April of 2004. It was a Saturday, so he'd let loose a little more than he originally intended, and he was starting to feel the effects, so he went out back for some fresh air. This wasn't the most popular bar in the city, so when he opened up the door and stepped out, he found himself completely alone. Despite that fact, he couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched. He looked around, squinting and trying his best to focus his eyes. Just then, John thought he spotted someone behind the dumpster, so he decided to investigate. When he looked behind the dumpster, there was no one to be found. Instead, painted on the wall was a piece of street art. It was a strange piece of art too. A half-human, half-owl creature, rendered in highly realistic detail. The figure was crouched over, and its eyes faced outwards. Eyes that looked far too real, like they were staring at him right out of the wall, following him as he swayed from side to side. There was something so wrong about it. Its intense gaze, its sharp beak, its grasping claws. How could anyone paint something like this? It looked like it could crawl right out of the bricks. Something about the painting made him nervous, but he couldn't look away. It was drawing him in, beckoning him. There was something about it that John just couldn't resist. He stepped closer until he was close enough to reach out and touch it. What John didn't know was that he was also close enough for it to reach out and touch him. Before he could react, he saw the painting come to life. The feathers ruffle, the hands prepare to grab, the beak opens up. For John, it was already too late. From inside the bar, the other patrons heard a loud scream from the alley. The bartender ran outside to see what was going on, but when he got there, all he found was a blood stain on the concrete. There was no sign of John Freeman, and there was no graffiti on the wall. This is just one of the dozens of recorded attacks attributed to what the SCP Foundation has designated SCP-1155, or the Predatory street art. It can appear on any wall in any major metropolitan area, but it prefers ones that are out of the way and isolated, such as back alleys, lonely parking structures, subway tunnels, and underpasses. The creature depicted in the street art has the long, sinewy arms of a human, with the head and feathery body of a large owl, and though its pose changes often, it's always facing out, watching. The Foundation is no stranger to deadly works of art, such as the infamous SCP-173, the living sculpture who will snap your neck if you stop looking at it, or SCP-1074, the abstract art capable of psychologically enthralling the viewer and leading them into a state of catatonia if exposed for too long. However, what sets SCP-1155 apart from these other two is the fact that it's incredibly hard to contain and its methods are particularly violent and gruesome. But more on that later. If you spot this odd painting while you're out walking with friends, you probably wouldn't give it a second thought. But if you're alone, it's a different story. This SCP has an almost hypnotic effect when viewed by a lone person. If you spot it, you'd be overwhelmed by curiosity, and you'll feel compelled to get a closer look. You can potentially resist this hypnotic effect with some effort, especially if you're aware of its anomalous properties, meaning knowledge really is power when it comes to SCP-1155. Once you get within 2 meters of SCP-1155 though, the creature will jump out of the wall and strike, with attacks usually following the same pattern. First, the victim will be restrained to prevent struggle or escape. The eyes and tongue will then be removed, followed by the amputation of the hands and feet. The victim will then be disemboweled and the intestines and stomach removed, all in as little as 6 seconds. But not all of these attacks result in death. Some have actually managed to survive attacks by the predatory street art, with those lucky few being eligible for Class A amnestic therapy, courtesy of the Foundation. In most cases, though, there's no survivors to find and often not even a body at all. Once SCP-1155 has begun its attack, and if it remains unspotted, it will snatch up its prey and vanish before appearing on the wall somewhere else. The Foundation has made attempts to discover where the bodies end up by equipping D-Class test subjects with GPS trackers, but the results of these tests have been inconclusive. Recorded relocation events have covered distances as small as 15 meters or as far as 800 kilometers. But the true range of this creature's movement is unknown. If caught in the act of feeding, though, SCP-1155 will disappear, leaving its victim behind. Usually in these cases, the victim will bleed out and die, but some have survived. 2 such survivors were D-Class personnel who were used for tests to see what happened when the attacks were interrupted. Both were incoherent and badly wounded following the attacks. Their eyes were gone, and one of them also had his tongue, hands, and feet removed. Though neither could adequately communicate what had happened to them, the one who still had a tongue claimed to still be able to see in spite of his missing eyes, and that he was still looking through his stolen eyes. He described what he could see: a kind of grisly pantry, where it appeared SCP-1155 had stashed the remains of its previous victims, perhaps to feed on later. This D-Class managed to escape from on-site quarters during an unrelated containment breach, running back to where he had been attacked by SCP-1155. He was pursued by law enforcement, who had been told by the SCP Foundation that he was an escaped mental patient suffering from serious delusions. The police chased him for several blocks before he disappeared down an alleyway. Officers at the scene reported hearing a scream, but when they got to where it came from, there was no sign of the D-Class. Just a dead-end alley with a blank wall. The other D-Class, the one with no tongue, was successfully relocated to an undisclosed location. While the patient was being moved, though, Foundation surveillance noted an increased level of movement from SCP-1155. The painting was appearing and disappearing, and in each relocation, its posture suggested hunting and tracking behavior, as if it was pursuing the one who got away. The places it was manifesting also became more and more public. At one point, it appeared on the side of a building right in the middle of town, though it was too high up to be reached by any of the hundreds of witnesses. While all of this was happening, the D-Class being held for medical treatment was becoming increasingly distressed. The Foundation theorized that the entity may have been frustrated at losing its prey, and that it would likely continue to relocate in and out of highly visible areas until the D-Class was returned to it. Because of this, the executive decision was made to take the D-Class to the outskirts of the city. SCP-1155 manifested in the area, and the team left both it and the D-Class unobserved. Both the creature and the D-Class soon disappeared, and SCP-1155 resumed its more manageable hunting behavior. Due to this SCP's ability to jump from place to place, it has proven difficult, if not impossible, to contain, and has a well-earned Keter class designation as a result. At first, the Foundation tried physically removing the wall on which the SCP had manifested, but this only caused it to relocate. A similar result happened following attempts to paint over or damage the painting. Current containment procedures involve closely monitoring the disused shopping mall lot where SCP-1155 currently seems to live, for lack of a better term. The mall has been marked as condemned, and Foundation agents continually monitor the area, posing as security guards to dissuade any civilian traffic from entering the danger zone. Mobile Task Force Pi-1, nicknamed the City Slickers, tried to obscure any surface on which the creature appeared, but this didn't end well. First, the team leader ordered that a vending machine be placed in front of the graffiti while it was located in an alley that transients were known to frequent. This was supposed to be only a temporary stopgap, intended to stop any unsuspecting person from falling under SCP-1155's hypnotic spell. In time, a proper containment zone would be established, with more agents forming a security perimeter around the area. But by the time the extra resources arrived and the vending machine was moved, the painting had disappeared. It had responded to the obstruction by relocating and reappearing on a wall at a nearby children's playground. The Foundation quickly mobilized, interrupting SCP-1155 in the middle of an attack in order to trigger another relocation. But sadly, several lives were already lost by the time they arrived. The entire ordeal was a tragic and costly mistake on the Foundation's part. It seems that when SCP-1155 is obstructed, it gets angry. Instances where it relocated after being obstructed more often than not resulted in it moving to a much more public place that would be harder to contain for the Foundation. While it previously appeared in low traffic areas, it now seemed emboldened following containment attempts and was readily appearing in public spaces. It was argued that all of humanity would be better off allowing a few people to be taken by SCP-1155 every couple of years than risk it ending up in a heavily populated area, where it could endanger who knows how many people before it was noticed. The Foundation continued to research possible containment procedures though, and eventually figured out the perfect minimum distance at which they could create a barrier so that it wouldn't be noticed by the SCP itself. This was one of their more expensive containment protocols, as it required purchasing an entire mall, only to shut it down and condemn it under the pretense of there being a dangerous sinkhole underneath it. The expense seems to have been worth it though, as SCP-1155 is currently still inside the parking structure connected to the mall. The mall and the parking structure are under round-the-clock surveillance via motion capture security cameras, and while there have been no other relocations, there's no telling what might trigger one again. So if you live in a big city and you find yourself walking alone at night, keep an eye on the street art. If you spot a painting of half-human, half-owl that you could swear wasn't there before, resist the urge to check it out and just cross the street instead. Shopping malls are one of the most common locations in the United States and are usually quite predictable and boring. So then why is the one mall near Havensbrook, Indiana one of the most closely guarded SCP Foundation sites? The Southwood Park Mall has been shuttered, with the mall encircled by fencing and all entrances closed off. Foundation agents under the supervision of Commander Lana Gray have standing orders that if anything emerges from the mall, it is to be contained by any means necessary, or eliminated with necessary force. Just what is lurking inside? This is SCP-4971. A terrifying uncontained entity that is capable of initializing a VK-class salted Earth end of human habitability scenario. While SCP-4971 appears to be a standard closed American shopping mall from the outside, what's inside is completely different. Within the mall is a time-space anomaly, and anyone who steps inside will find themselves in a massive outdoor climate under a sun that looks to be perpetually setting. While the climate and flora in the area appear to be similar to the Pacific Northwest or Yukon Territory, testing of samples has been inconclusive. What is clear to those who have explored this biosphere within the mall is that it is much larger than the confines of the mall, and the limits of its territory are unknown. But those who wander in are not alone, and that's where the threat lies. The Southwood Park Mall had operated since 1985, but by 2006 the last stores closed and the mall was left vacant and abandoned. The sign of urban blight soon attracted trespassers and criminals. Soon rumors began swirling about the strange rituals being performed by local teens. While many people alleged supernatural doings, no proof was found. That is, until 2007. It started as a standard break-in, and police were notified. But as they explored, they started hearing disturbing sounds. Screams and sounds that didn't sound like they came from this world. The trespassers were nowhere to be found, despite reports that a huge group was there. The search eventually revealed the portal to SCP-4971, which appears at different places in the mall and doesn't seem to be consistent. The Foundation quickly compiled all the information they had on the site and discovered connections to a dangerous group. One of the people reported to break in was Katarina Randolph, a local missing teenager with ties to Anna Christian, who was a known occultist in possession of artifacts used in summoning rituals. Both were members of the Daughters of Eden, a cult that believed that mankind had disrupted the natural order and magic must be used to restore nature to its proper place. The Foundation believed Christian might have been in possession of the last appeal of Bifi, a text supposedly based on the last words of a witch killed during a botched exorcism. Many believe the text had the power to summon nature spirits to drive away colonists. While most copies had been destroyed, this one had made its way from Nazi Germany all the way to Miskatonic University in Massachusetts, and now it was potentially in the hands of dangerous cultists. While Anna Christian was apprehended months earlier in a raid on the Daughters of Eden, the manuscript was nowhere to be found, and neither was Katerina Randolph, until she was seen breaking into the Southwood Park Mall just before the anomalous activity began. While the book contains several minor rituals, the final one claims to summon something called the One Who Knows Silence in the Earth, the entity Byfie reportedly called out for in her last words. A raid on Randolph's former living quarters revealed a rambling message where she referred to herself as a daughter of Gaea and Eden, and vowed to avenge the crimes committed against Earth and nature. Knowing these facts, the Foundation debated on how to contain SCP-4971. While they didn't believe the entity had been summoned, they believed it was in process, with the final ritual yet to be completed, a ritual that required a high level of human sacrifice. A team was deployed consisting of codenamed agents. There was the team leader Eclipse, fire team Roman and Mercury, science team Atlantis and Bangkok, and 9 Eyes on communications. They entered the closed mall, where there had been little activity, and turned on their lights to see around the darkened facility. It seemed normal at first, except for the disrepair and vandalism, but they soon noticed something odd. The mall didn't smell like an abandoned building. There was wind in it, and it smelled deeply unpleasant. As they entered the deserted atrium, they noticed the destruction seemed worse than expected, with a collapsed skywalk that couldn't have been knocked down by the vandals. As the team explored an abandoned clothing store, they encountered a humanoid figure that seemed to be covered in thick webbing, like they had been the victim of giant spiders who had planned to eat them later. And just beyond them, 3 unidentified figures lurked but didn't move, their eyes glowing in the darkness. They left the clothing store and decided to watch if the strange figures would follow them, but they remained where they were. The team advanced into the mall, where they could hear the sound of rushing water getting louder despite no water in sight. And it was clear that the area they were exploring was far longer than the Southwood Park Mall should be. A sign on a store seemed to be written in no language at all. As the team entered another large atrium, the mall suddenly ended, and they found themselves in a different world. They stood atop a massive cliff overlooking a forest that seemed to extend forever. The sun was low in the sky and didn't move no matter how long they waited. The land seemed natural, except for a large symbol several meters away. It looked like a series of rings surrounding triangles and small rings carved into the ground. An area in the middle was burned, as if it had been the site of a fire, and several glass vials on the ground had been shattered. But most disturbing was the thick red liquid filling the trenches surrounding the symbols. A quick analysis of the liquid revealed it to be human blood. Further examination of the site revealed an altar, a machete, and pages from the last appeal of Byfie, specifically the ones to summon the entity described in the end. But while the ritual demanded a high level of human sacrifice, no bodies could be found. The ritual was governed by the weight of the human hearts sacrificed, and an analysis revealed that the 61 people who had entered the mall and 4 officers who went missing would have reached a sufficient number to complete the ritual. The Foundation was preparing to bring in a heavy fire team to eliminate the entity before it became a larger threat, but the team was skeptical. They hadn't seen any hostile presence yet, and had no idea what this entity was even supposed to resemble. They reported their findings back to command, offering to bring back the manuscript and other evidence, but were asked to move to a nearby water source and to hold their position until the heavy fire team arrived. They hiked through the nearby woods, noticing an increase in electromagnetic static that started to mess with their equipment. Mercury soon realized that they were being watched. While the other team members were skeptical, Mercury insisted that 5 or 6 entities were tailing them to the east. They started hearing odd chattering, unlike any known animal sound. They couldn't locate the entity on thermal, but it soon came into view. It appeared to be an animal, but an odd flashing light appeared around its head, and it kept appearing and disappearing. As they approached the river, the sun, which had not moved for hours, suddenly started setting, and it became abnormally dark. They tried to make contact with command, but the static had shut down their equipment. All recordings then cut out simultaneously, and contact with the team was lost. While the team was not recovered, the Foundation obtained enough information to put together a report on the entity for the heavy fire team. They had determined that SCP-4971 was the largest spatial anomaly ever encountered, being at least 400,000 meters in volume. It seemed to be self-sustaining and maintained by an entity of enormous power. The symbol that appeared in the ritual was known as the Voxen Eye and appeared in the last appeal of Bifi as the symbol she carved into her chest. It had been referenced repeatedly in arcane writings and seemed to have its roots in the pre-Columbian North American occult, and it also appeared to be linked to the one who knows silence in the earth, the ancient being that took its payment in human hearts. It was time to send in the heavy fire team. The team consisted of Team Lead Horizon, Communications Officer Aleppo, and heavy fire agents Vestige, Kato, Carrier, Ashen, and Wild. They followed the original team, who had lost contact but was still transmitting their location. The Foundation wanted to set up a long-range transmitter that would make it easier to communicate and set up a permanent base inside the anomaly. They advanced into the eerily quiet forest, the sun back in its usual position. As they walked, an unknown signal suddenly came over their broadcast. It was a song, broken up by static. The girl from Ipanema. The team was confused, but they would soon have much bigger concerns. There was a rustling in the woods, and a large group of figures emerged, followed by a single, much larger figure. It looked vaguely humanoid, but it was surrounded by a tangle of branches, vines, and leaves. More disturbingly, it didn't have a head. In place where its face would be, there was a strange bright triangle that seemed to be vibrating in and out of place. The recorders became more and more distorted as soon as this being appeared. The team tried to make contact with the entity, but it didn't respond. They fired their weapons, and the creature screamed and collapsed against a tree. The strange symbol shattered. While the entity seemed to be dead, their sensors picked up a mob of figures moving their way. They heard a high-pitched scream over their earpieces, and they were surrounded by dozens of similar entities. The beings gathered around their fallen member. The team heard an odd sound of breaking glass mending, and the creature rose from the ground and rejoined its brothers, and started advancing towards the team. The team moved away, but was quickly overwhelmed. Kato fell and was overcome by the creatures. Ashen fell in battle, and Wild lost an arm. As the group fled from the creatures, Aleppo's communicator went off. It was Eclipse from the first team contacting for help. Horizon made contact and listened to instructions that told them to head for high ground. The remaining members of the heavy fire team headed for a nearby rise, still chased by the chattering entities. The ground under them shook, and Wild fell behind and was snatched by the entities. In the end, it was only Aleppo, Vestige, and Carrier that survived to meet Eclipse. They compared notes, and Eclipse said that they had been there for a week trying to survive against the hostile beings. But the heavy fire team had entered less than a day after them, and had been there less than half a day. Something was wrong with the passage of time, but the team had barely any time to reflect on this in their new safe spot. They heard intense static from their radios, followed by a low, droning sound. Their cameras broadcast a single still frame of something approaching, a multi-legged entity. And then their communications cut out and both teams were lost again. Additional recordings were found from the survivors of the first team led by Eclipse, detailing their experiences within the anomaly. They reported being in there for months, with their rations running out. While the water was drinkable, they reported it may be making them sick. The plants were inedible, burning their mouths, and the sun seemed to move only with their movements. They approached a mountain seeking what they believed was a way back home. But as they approached, they encountered a mysterious figure that appeared to be a naked woman dancing near a symbol on the ground and a human heart. The team tried to contact her and realized she was singing the same song they had heard on the radio earlier. It was Katarina Randolph, the missing cultist. When she turned around, they could see a large wound on her chest. As she ignored the team's orders, Nine Eyes fired and Randolph crumpled to the ground. Suddenly, there was a surge of energy, and the team was knocked to the ground. A new entity appeared in front of them, a massive being with a deer-like appearance but missing its head and neck, surrounded by glowing orbs and with a massive white crest in place of its head. Suddenly, Randolph's body lifted into the air and the girl began speaking again. She called out to Gaea, claiming the entity could have her, and Randolph was transformed into one of the entities as her head collapsed in on itself. The sky darkened, and the team was lifted into the air, their hearts suddenly pulled from their chests. Only Mercury was left standing, running for safety. He was cornered by Katerina, pulled his gun, and the footage cut out one last time. SCP-4971 Nabla had been discovered, and it was one of the most dangerous beings the Foundation had ever encountered. An interview with Anna Christian, now in Foundation custody, revealed that the creature was sustained by rituals, all magical rituals of any kind. Human sacrifice gave it extra power, but it derived strength from everything, including the Foundation's many magical locks to contain entities. Stopping all operations would weaken the creature, but would also endanger the Earth countless times over by the potential release of the other contained entities. It was unkillable. It was near impossible to contain, and it was searching for a way out into the world. And it was only a matter of time before it found it. The good news is that there is a reverse ritual, but the price is high. The last appeal of Bifi contains a reverse incantation that seals the portal to SCP-4971, but it requires a human sacrifice as well, and the cost increases exponentially. The Foundation investigated and discovered that the cost would eventually increase to the lives of every living being on Earth that had not already been converted into the beings inside SCP-4971. The SCP Foundation was faced with an impossible choice. Here was an incredibly powerful being that could end the world, and the only two ways to stop it both posed an unacceptable risk to the world. The Foundation met to discuss their options and came up with a new esoteric classification for the object: Cernunons. Objects classified as Cernunons can be functionally contained, but the Foundation cannot achieve this due to logistical or ethical reasons. Therefore, SCP-4971 remains within the Southwood Park Mall, guarded by the Foundation, with SCP-4971 Nabla inside and hopefully contained there, at least for now. If you ever take a trip across the pond to some of the more rural parts of the British Isles, you might just hear some tales of a dark, shadowy shape, a creature stalking through the night, an omen of death. It's an entity that has been known by many names, including the Grim or Black Shuck. Most folks will tell you the same, that this nightmare takes on the form of a huge black dog, but is also known to be able to change its shape, often appearing at nighttime. The apparition is said to be demonic in nature, commonly associated with the devil himself, believed by some to be a hellhound like Garmr and Cerberus, guardians of the underworld in Norse and Greek mythology. The dog is far larger than your average pet, with big glowing eyes. It is also known to stalk crossroads, ancient pathways, and places where executions took place. Those who catch sight of Black Shuck are often befallen with bad luck, and for some it can even mean that death will soon be upon them. Of course, this is nothing more than a bit of local folklore, spooky tales designed to drum up tourism. But is the Black Shuck really just a legend, or is there something more to the tale? After all, it's not as if a dog like that could really exist, could it? Enter SCP-023, otherwise known as, yes, you guessed it, the Black Shuck. Much like the creatures from the stories, SCP-023 is an entity possessing a canine form, far larger than most domesticated dogs. SCP-023 is described as being shaggy in appearance, with black fur and glowing orange-red eyes, as well as prominent fangs. Through testing, the SCP Foundation has determined a number of the dog's anomalous abilities. First and foremost, legends have described the Black Shuck as an apparition or spirit, and much in the same vein, SCP-023 is able to pass right through solid matter. The creature can pass through walls seemingly at will, but does also seem to have a physical form, at least when it is kept in containment. To prevent a breach, the Foundation keeps SCP-023 in a walled-off intersection of two corridors, sporting fake doors at 3 of its 4 ends, with only one real entrance. Why does the dog's containment unit require such a specific layout? Simple. It has to resemble a crossroad, even if this is merely a superficial resemblance. Remember that the Black Shuck of legend often appeared at crossroads, a sign that would warn those traveling of their impending doom. As long as SCP-023 remains contained in the cell resembling crossroads, it cannot pass through walls. Should the Black Shuck ever escape this enclosure, however, then it will use its anomalous abilities to incinerate anything in its path. The dog can burn through walls no matter how dense, and will travel from location to location by this method. Also in keeping with the Shuck of folklore, looking into the eyes of SCP-023 can hold potentially devastating outcomes. Should any person make direct eye contact with the dog, then death will be upon them. Within the span of the next full year, either the person who looked at the Black Shuck in the eye or a close member of their family will die, just like a number of the legends state. The Foundation has no concrete idea how the Shuck chooses its victims, with no patterns or obvious preferences, only that they will die a year after eye contact. Researchers aren't even sure if SCP-023 selects its victims from the moment eye contact is made, or if this choice is made during the year that follows, or even if it is a conscious choice at all. All that is known for certain is that if you were to look into the beast's glowing eyes, there would be no way for you to tell if you or a relative would suffer the consequences, only when. In the past, the SCP Foundation attempted to eliminate an individual that looked into SCP-023's eyes, along with their whole family before the year was up, trying to take any potential victims away from the Black Shuck before they could be hunted down by the anomalous canine. Much like the way the creature passes through walls by incinerating solid matter, the way SCP-023 dispatches its chosen victims seem to almost be linked to the use of heat. The Foundation has conducted a number of autopsies on those killed by SCP-023, and their findings have always yielded the same result. Anyone killed by the Black Shuck will not exhibit any signs of external damage, no burn marks on their skin or any kind of contusions. However, on closer inspection, these bodies appear to have been filled in, their insides replaced with highly compacted ash. All their organs and internal bodily systems appear to be incinerated by the Black Shuck, but somehow this occurs so rapidly that there is no notable damage caused to the outside of their bodies. To prevent SCP-023 claiming any further victims, the Foundation has another measure in place. The Black Shuck has been fitted with 2 spheres made of hard rubber. These are inserted into the creature's sunken-in eye sockets, blocking anyone from accidentally making eye contact with it. However, over time, thanks to the heating effect of the Shuck's state, these inserts will begin to degrade. When security cameras detect that the glow of SCP-023's eyes have returned to a dangerous level, Foundation personnel will have to replace the rubber spheres to once again block the creature's vision. However, this can only be done after sunset, and any personnel tasked with replacing the inserts are cautioned not to look the dog in the eyes during the process, unless they want to become the Black Shuck's next victim. The SCP Foundation first came into contact with SCP-023 when they received information about an attack that had taken place at a church. While the location of this incident is unknown, if the legends are to be believed, the church may have been located in the moors of a rural region of the British Isles. While the church was in the middle of a service, the Black Shuck entered and killed a number of civilians in attendance. Presumably the members of this congregation had all at some point seen the large black dog out in the moors, or one of their relatives had. The Foundation stepped in and managed to capture the Black Shuck, giving amnestics to the survivors that had witnessed the attack. The damage done by SCP-023 and the deaths it caused were covered up as attempted arson. However, the Foundation's trouble with SCP-023 was far from over. After the Black Shuck's capture at the church, the dog was able to breach containment on multiple occasions. At first, it had been placed in a standard containment chamber, but it was quickly able to incinerate through the concrete walls of the cell. Foundation personnel later discovered that the dog had settled in an intersection between 2 corridors and realized that it had resembled a crossroad. These exact corridors became the basis for SCP-023's new containment chamber, and the assistant researcher originally assigned to the dog was reprimanded for negligence. During this and other escape attempts, SCP-023 caused the deaths of a high number of Foundation personnel. As a direct result, researchers assigned to it requested that the Black Shuck be reclassified as a Keter-class anomaly. They also noted that SCP-023 shared certain traits with SCP-1111-1, one of the two entities that form SCP-1111. SCP-1111-1, also referred to as the White Dog, possesses an almost ghostly translucent canine form and abilities that focus on geographic space. In the White Dog's case, it will attack anyone it detects approaching SCP-1111-2, the body of an unidentified man hanging from a noose. Researchers working for the Foundation believe that SCP-023 and SCP-1111-1 might be instances of the same phenomenon, but have been unable to capture the White Dog in order to verify this. Given the number of deaths the Black Shuck had caused, research personnel attempted to reduce the danger that they faced when interacting with the dog. They helped to remove the beast's eyes and teeth, thus making it safer. However, it was during an attempt to do so that SCP-023 once again managed to breach containment. At first, everything seemed to be going according to plan, but when researchers removed SCP-023's eyes, the Black Shuck vanished completely from its containment area. SCP security staff scoured the area for it, eventually tracking the dog down to a long stretch of interstate. It is still unknown exactly how many civilians may have seen the Black Shuck as they drove past it, but so far 9 deaths are thought to have stemmed from this incident. The ghostly dog was recaptured, and D-Class personnel removed its fangs. After analyzing the times of incidents, researchers realized that SCP-023 had only been able to escape while the sun was up, leading to new containment procedures mandating that no staff member was to interact with the Shuck until after sunset. The interstate fiasco led to the doctor assigned to watch over SCP-023 being suspended and facing a disciplinary review from his Foundation superiors. The blame for the breach in security that caused the incident was placed at his feet, and a new doctor was placed in charge of observing the Black Shuck. Unfortunately for this new researcher, the incidents involving SCP-023 did not stop there. The newly appointed doctor attempted to give the dog a pair of glass eyes to replace the ones that had been removed before the previous containment breach. Perhaps they thought it was a gesture of kindness, a compassionate act, or maybe they just thought it would look cool for a dog to have glass eyes. No matter the reason, it seemed they had forgotten for a moment that this huge shadow creature was an ancient evil entity and not a dog at all. When the doctor gave the new glass eyes to SCP-023, they immediately took on the exact same properties as its old ones. They began glowing, molten glass leaking from the dog's sockets, and appeared on all reflective surfaces throughout the site the Shuck was being held at. Everything from mirrors and windows to lenses and glasses, computer monitors, anything and everything glass. The Foundation suffered an enormous number of deaths that day. Even staff sitting in the cafeteria would have seen a version of those orange glowing eyes staring at them from the bottom of their bowls, marking them for a fiery death. The facility was quickly evacuated, but the damage had already been done. Anyone that had seen a reflection of the Black Shuck's eyes would be dead within a year. Devastated, the new doctor in charge of overseeing SCP-023 blamed themselves for dooming their research team, as well as the rest of the Foundation staff in the facility. When the sun came up over the horizon, a number of D-Class personnel were sent into SCP-023's enclosure, only to find that the dog had once again vanished. The only trace it had left behind was a puddle of molten glass burning part of the floor. A year later, any and all personnel that had gazed into the Black Shuck's eyes were dead, and their remains were buried in a mass, unmarked grave near the containment facility. Despite the doctor vowing to recapture and contain SCP-023, it remains unclear if they were ever actually successful. There is a chance that the Black Shuck has been gradually making its way back home to the moors of the British Isles. If so, we advise you not to travel after sundown unless you absolutely have to. And if you find yourself at a crossroad, then pray you don't catch sight of a hulking demonic hound staring out at you with eyes that burn through the dark. If you do, well, we hope you enjoy your year. Who among us hasn't wondered what happens after our lives have come to their inevitable ending? and we play out our final moments in the land of the living. The concept of what happens to us after we've died has baffled scientists and philosophers the world over for almost as long as human civilization has existed. Some out there already claim to know the exact answer. You probably already know that the belief in the existence of an afterlife is one held by almost every single religion and culture around the globe. Heaven, hell, Valhalla, purgatory, limbo, Sheol, the world to come. Descriptions of the afterlife and how to get sent there often varies depending on the religion or cultural group it is linked to. But to think in more general terms, the concept usually revolves around the soul leaving the body after death and living forever in eternal paradise. That is, of course, unless you've committed any deadly sins during your lifetime. If the myths are to be believed, these normally result in you being sent down to spend eternity in damnation and endless punishment instead of paradise. Sadly, there's no way to prove if any of the various afterlives actually exist. By their very nature, these afterlives exist separate from the real physical world that we live in while we are still alive. While we're here on Earth, we can only observe what we see happening to a body after death, and what we assume or believe the afterlife might be like. After all, it's not like any deceased person can tell us what being dead is like. Well, not under the normal circumstances anyway. With no proof of the afterlife's existence, we do unfortunately get left with the bleak and existentially terrifying assumption that when we die, there is nothing waiting for us on the other side. What if there is no light at the end of the tunnel, no pearly gates, just nothing forever? But what if someone or some mysterious group of persons already knew the answer to what happened after the end of all human life? And what if the answer was so much more horrifying than we ever could have imagined? So much so that this shadowy cabal had already tried to prevent the fate awaiting all of us after we die. Be warned, we're about to delve into the unsettling tale of something known as Project Dammerung and its connection to something known as SCP-3448. As the Foundation categorizes it. It is a story about our fear of what comes next, beyond this mortal coil. This is the catalyst for the Foundation uncovering the most horrific secret in human history, a truth that should have stayed buried. Warning, we are about to unravel the beginning of the end. The end of what, you might be asking? Why, the end of death itself, of course. Any outsider looking in might think we're being a little bit overdramatic here, but we'll forgive you for that mistake. You can have that one on us. At first glance to the untrained eye and uninformed individual, SCP-3448 might just seem like little more than a magnetic resonance imaging machine. Chances are you've seen these big machines in medical dramas, or maybe you've even been placed inside one during a stay at the hospital. Using powerful magnets, an MRI machine aligns all the protons in your body. Then the machine generates a pulse of radio frequency current to create a detailed image of the inside of a patient's body. Basically, to put it in extremely oversimplified terms, it's a big camera for looking at your internal organs. Now, don't forget to smile, really show off that pancreas. It looks great at this angle. Of course, when dealing with anomalies encountered by the SCP Foundation, few things are ever really exactly as they first seem. And in that very same vein, SCP-3448 is far more than just a harmless piece of medical apparatus. Look beyond the main bulk of the MRI machine, and you'll start to notice that a few unique modifications have been made to the device. For one, the winding mass of jumper cables connecting the machine to its rudimentary upgrades, namely the same type of technology used in particle accelerators, along with a whole collection of custom circuit boards. For another, although you wouldn't know just from looking at SCP-3448, the contraption has also been through a number of anomalous rituals, seemingly combining the technological with the occult and spiritual. But the question remains, why? What is this thing for exactly? To put it simply, it's a hotline to the great beyond. SCP-3448 is a means of communication with the world of the dead themselves. Now, we might be oversimplifying things yet again there, so let's take it from the top. Project Dammerung was the name given to those who developed SCP-3448. That designation doesn't just refer to the modified MRI machine itself, but also the communication that said device was capable of after the Project Dammerung team had finished their tinkering with it. You see, nobody knows what happens to us after we die, because no one has ever been able to experience being dead in the real world and existing in the afterlife at the same time. But with SCP-3448, that problem just simply isn't an issue anymore. Still with us so far? Okay, here's how the machine actually works. A living human is placed inside, just like those ordinary MRI machines at your local hospital. However, the difference here is that the extra anomalous components of SCP-3448, the rituals, the particle acceleration, and so on, allow this person to enter a unique state of being halfway between life and death. Their bodily functions are halted, brought to a stop by the machine. However, they are still able to retain their consciousness and the awareness that this allows for. Not quite dead, but not quite alive either. Sort of an unalive state, or a half-death, if you prefer, or perhaps afterlife. Now, while a person is in this half-death, they will have entered a conceptual state of being. This is referred to as SCP-3448-A, an existence of pure consciousness while physical form, in this case the person's body, exists separately in the real world. The body, now called SCP-3448-1, no longer houses a subject's consciousness, their essence, not just their mind, but their thoughts and personality. If it helps to think of it in theological terms, you could even think of it as their soul. But while the machine's function is all very impressive and interesting, what's the actual point to it? Why spend so much time trying to create a controlled separation of consciousness from a dead body? What's Project Dammerung for? Well, that's easy. SCP-3448 is the primary tool intended to complete the sole objective of Project Dammerung, a mission to capture a dangerous cognito-hazard, namely, death itself. To be clear, when we say death, we don't mean the Grim Reaper, that skull-faced, scythe-wielding embodiment of oblivion. Chances are you can probably catch him just by going out on Halloween with a big net. But Project Dammerung's goal was to contain the actual process of death, the very concept that takes a living, conscious entity and makes it the opposite. You see, when a living subject is placed in SCP-3448 and their consciousness leaves their brain, it leaves behind some kind of anomalous electrical energy signature. As you may already know if you can remember back to high school biology class, the brain uses electrical impulses to send signals all over the body, allowing your organs to function, your limbs to move, and your muscles to contract or relax. What's strange is, this electrical activity seems to continue within the brain of someone whose consciousness has been separated from their body by SCP-3448. Studying these signals, the SCP Foundation personnel working on Project Dammerung have inferred that these are residual signals, replicating how the brain would react if the subject introduced into the half-dead SCP-3448-1 state as if they were still alive, even though they have to be dead in order to access that state in the first place. And now your brain is probably such a mess of electrical signals trying to keep up with all of that you might have actually completely missed the part where we told you that Project Dammerung is actually a Foundation-backed project. Okay, let's have a speedy recap. So far, we have an anomalously modified MRI machine capable of splitting the consciousness, or soul, of a person after rendering them clinically dead. On top of that, the Foundation themselves sanctioned the project that created this device in an effort to capture and contain death itself. But how did this come about? Who among the SCP Foundation would want to contain death so much to commission an entire project dedicated to that goal? Well, who do we all know sitting above the entire Foundation, overseeing everything, infamous for all having some anomalous form of immortality, and would stand to gain from Project Dammerung? That's right, the World Championship Death Dodgers, the O5 Council. You see, in order to more fully understand why Project Dammerung was established and why they built SCP-3448, we need to explain a little bit about a different anomaly, SCP-6718. We have another video on this channel that goes into more detail about that, but to put it in a nutshell, SCP-6718 is the horrible truth about what happens to us after we die. The O5 Council first learned of it when one of their own, O5-11, full name Roger Sheldon, died of a stroke. O5-11 was the only council member to have refused to accept any of the anomalous treatments or enhancements that prevented the other O5s from dying. However, the council chose to resurrect him. Upon his return to the land of the living, Roger Sheldon told the other overseers what he had learned about the nature of the afterlife, what lies beyond this fleeting mortal coil, waiting for us after we die. Roger had experienced firsthand that the dead actually remain conscious after their bodies have shut down all other functions. That meant that everyone, every person to have died over the course of human history, has remained aware of everything that happened to them afterward. They can feel themselves slowly decaying, their bones and skin withering, buried under the cold, wasting away into nothingness day after day. And that's SCP-6718, the painful truth that there is no paradise, no heaven, no afterlife. There is just endless, silent consciousness beyond the end of every life. This revelation is what instigated the Overseer Council, specifically O5-4, to establish Project Dammerung. It was learning the answer to what happens next that spurred the creation of SCP-3448. The intention was, by reading and interacting with those residual electrical signals in the brain, that the Foundation could create a link, a form of two-way communication between them and the living world and the subject, SCP-3448-A, in their half-dead state. Using other items and anomalous technology connected to the MRI machine, the Foundation's researchers could interpret the electrical signals in SCP-3448-A's brain as images. A Foundation agent by the name of Anthony Michaels proved to be the only test subject capable of using SCP-3448, beyond the earliest tests on animal specimens. And we know what you're thinking. The Foundation would normally use D-Class personnel for this sort of test. After all, it's a machine that renders you almost dead, stopping all bodily function. The problem was Project Dammerung needed someone loyal to the Foundation, and D-Classes could hardly be trusted to follow orders without the threat of death. Think about it. You separate their consciousness from their body, and they don't care if you threaten to kill them. Agent Michaels served as the SCP-3448-A component, residing within the modified MRI machine, held in a state between life and death. But something went wrong. Something that would ultimately do more harm than good. The Foundation had tried in vain to contain death, and in tampering with forces well beyond their own understanding, may have accidentally done something even worse. They neutralized it. They killed death. And things only went downhill from there. Hey, do you have a favorite reality show? Oh, come on, don't lie, everyone has one. Dr. Clef loves some American Ninja Warrior, and I've got it on good authority that Dr. Bright can't get enough of The Bachelor. So how about you, huh? Do you obsessively follow the romantic highs and lows of Love Island? Or are you more of the type who likes to curl up with a mug of hot cocoa and enjoy a nice, wholesome episode of The Great British Baking Show? Do you ever yell at the TV when the contestants on Jeopardy just can't get the answer right? Do you get a kick out of seeing what crazy collectibles will show up on this week's episode of Pawn Stars? If you answered yes to any of these, you're not alone. Millions of people around the world still tune in to all kinds of reality TV. Personally, I just can't get enough of my favorite hidden camera show, Laugh is Fun. What's that? You've never heard of Laugh is Fun? No. Oh boy, you're really missing out. If you like reality TV, you're going to love Laugh is Fun. Laugh is Fun, also known as SCP-2030, isn't a show that you can watch on TV. Instead, it appears as the most popular form of media distribution in the current year. Today, you can find it on file sharing and streaming websites, but in the 2000s, you could rent it from the DVD kiosk at the mall. And back in the 90s, it used to show up as multi-tape sets in video rental stores. Even though the SCP Foundation has only been aware of Laugh is Fun since 1993, it has a recorded 38 seasons as of 2014, meaning that it may have existed in some form as far back as the 1970s. If you want to binge all 38 seasons, you might also want to look it up under the names Laugh is Life, or in some countries, Laugh is Laugh. And if you happen to be in a country where Laugh is Laugh isn't available, you may want to try changing your location using a VPN to one where you can access it. Oh, what's that? You don't have a VPN service? Well then, I'm glad you're here, because before we go any further, I have a very important word from our sponsor, who just so happens to be NordVPN, the preferred VPN service of all the researchers here at SCP Explained. Sign up now at nordvpn.com/SCP Explained. NordVPN isn't just a VPN, it's truly the best VPN available. With a simple click, you'll be able to access content that might be blocked just because of your location, so you'll never have to miss an episode of your favorite anomalous television programs. But wait, there's more, much more. What if you're right in the middle of binge watching of season 31 when suddenly your quality dips to looking like a couple of blurry blocks are fighting over an old shoebox? Never fear, because NordVPN encrypts all of your traffic. That means your internet service provider can't throttle your service and slow down your streaming speed. You should never settle for less than the highest quality pixels after all. And it doesn't matter how you choose to watch. NordVPN is available on every modern platform, including Windows, iOS, Android, macOS, Linux, and even Android TV. The monthly cost is the same as a cup of coffee. Regular coffee, that is, not the kind that comes from SCP-294. And if you sign up by going to nordvpn.com/SCP Explained, you'll even get a free month. So go try it for yourself right now. That's nordvpn.com/SCP Explained. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. As we were saying, Laugh is Fun is a prank show that puts unknowing everyday people into ridiculous scenarios and films their reactions. Each episode is about 10 to 12 minutes long and features an opening and closing monologue from beloved, supposedly human TV presenter Laffy McLafferson, aka SCP-2030-1. You've probably seen him before. He's never seen without his blue three-piece suit and black wingtip shoes. Funniest guy on TV, seriously. I think he should replace James Corden on The Late Late Show, and maybe even take up hosting a gig on SNL, if he's still got time after. He had this amazing monologue at the end of an episode in season 32.
Haha, what a ride, huh, folks? We've seen printers that eat, eaters that print, and everything in between. Makes you appreciate the old clunker you have at the back office, doesn't it? No, printers may not always work when you want or need them to, but they sure make for some excellent comedy. And that's what we're all about here. Comedy. We're here to make you laugh. We hope you laughed. Thank you for laughing with us. That's what we're about here, doesn't it, folks? Come laugh with us again next time, and remember, laugh is fun! Good night and laugh, just laugh, we love to make laugh. Make more for laughter so as to for laugh. Laugh with us, laugh with us, laugh with us. Laugh with us, laugh with us, laugh with us. Laugh, laugh, laugh. Laugh and let us in.
I couldn't tell you what his face looks like though, because he's always framed from the neck down. Once the pranks are done for the episode, he'll step up on that bright yellow stage and deliver his closing monologue, which always ends with a pan over the audience as everyone chants, "Laugh with us." Then the show always just cuts to black. The closest thing the show ever has to credits is a title card that says, "Filmed in front of a studio audience in partnership with YWTGTHFT." For a show that doesn't advertise or even air on TV, Laugh is Fun is still a beloved classic, and when you watch it, it's easy to see why it's been around so long. Laffy and the team pull off some really classic pranks on Laugh is Laugh. There's this one episode in season 13 where an unsuspecting family is sitting down to dinner. Father starts choking and the family reacts with horror until suddenly a pair of slits appear in the father's neck, allowing him to breathe. Those slits soon become nostrils, and before you know it, a full second head grows out of his neck. That head then grows its own neck, which grows a noose, then a face, then another head, then another neck. This keeps happening a total of 18 times while the rest of the family looks on in horror. But don't worry, before things go too far, Laffy pops out from under the table and tells the family they're on Laugh is Fun. Laffy points out the cameras and the whole family starts laughing, including all 18 of the father's heads. There's also another great season 13 episode called Squirrels. Oh man, okay, this one had me in stitches. Alright, so there's this couple lying in bed, and the wife wakes up because she hears this squeaking noise. She taps her husband on the shoulder to wake him up, but she draws her hand back in horror because she can feel something moving under her husband's skin. So before she can ask if he's okay, boom! Hundreds of squirrels explode out of his skin and start running around the room while the wife screams. Then Laffy walks in and turns the lights on, accompanied by the husband, who is perfectly okay, even though he's been skinned from head to toe. Everyone laughs. Alright, then there's the most recent episode from season 24 called Swelling. There's this old lady sitting on a park bench feeding the pigeons, and a couple walks past her. When they walk past, the old lady gets swarmed by the pigeons she's feeding. The pigeons force themselves into her mouth and keep swarming until her stomach cavity bursts open. The couple, who gets sprayed with guts as all the pigeons fly off, are extremely distressed by this until Laffy shows up. Some people say that this episode is too similar to Squirrels and that the show was starting to get stale at this point, but I think the joke is unique enough to stand on its own. Plus, with a prank show as long-running as Laugh, it's inevitable that you're gonna see some jokes get reused. Really, it's not about the prank itself, it's about the reactions of the people, which are always priceless. And man, the way that Laffy McLafferson comes into the frame by climbing out of the old lady's open ribcage, I was rolling on the floor. Ah, you don't think the old animals exploding out of people bit is funny? Okay, that's fair enough. Let me think. What are some of my other favorite episodes of Laugh is Fun? Oh, yes! The Margaret Thatcher episode from season 21. That's another great thing about Laugh is Fun. It's not afraid to get a little political. So this woman walks into her kitchen and opens the cabinet, but instead of the food being in there, it's just a big blob of flesh. The flesh blob rolls out onto the counter and morphs into a misshapen caricature of Margaret Thatcher with a disproportionately big head. The woman starts screaming, but the Thatcher creature jumps onto her, pinning her down and shoving its tongue into her mouth. The deeper the tongue goes, the more Margaret Thatcher faces start appearing all over the woman's skin. All the faces start reciting Thatcher's April 1986 speech on the bombing of Libya in perfect unison. You might watch it and think the woman's going to choke based on how long the creature's tongue is down her throat, but good old Laffy comes in and the studio audience goes nuts. Laffy points out to the cameras and says, "You're on Laugh is Fun!" And the woman starts laughing too, with the creature's tongue still in her mouth. But I think my favorite prank I've ever seen on Laugh is Fun was the one from season 37. So, it's in a hospital. There's a woman getting a C-section and all the doctors are gathered around. One of the doctors makes a comment on how much hair the baby has, and then he screams and drops his surgical tools. The rest of the team all start screaming as well, and then, this is where it gets really funny, you see Ryan Seacrest's head pop up from out of the woman. Okay, so this is causing her a lot of pain, obviously, so she starts screaming and crying as the Ryan Seacrest head fully emerges, at which point you can tell that its head is on an octopus body. Classic bait and switch, right? But that's not the end. The Ryan Seacrest octopus starts singing "Row, row, row your boat" as it emerges, and then 3 more octopi with celebrities' heads come out of this woman. There's one that looks like Jack Nicholson, one that looks like Johnny Cash, and one who looks like Martin Freeman. And when they've all come out of her, they start singing together in 4-part harmony. It's hilarious. Laffy walks in to point out the cameras, and all the doctors start laughing. Even the woman on the operating table is laughing. In fact, she laughs so hard she passes out. It's a real shame that there are never any end credits, because it would be so cool to find out more about the people who make this show. I mean, they're total comedic geniuses, and special effects wizards too. I couldn't even guess how they do some of those pranks. But sadly, there's very little information about the show online, and you can't even ask the victims of the pranks about it, because all of them are dead. What? No, not because of Laugh is Fun, that's just a prank show, it's all jokes. They always show everyone laughing and perfectly okay at the end, no matter how badly they got mutilated in the episode. You can even see some people who have been on previous episodes among the studio audiences if you look hard enough. But, okay, by total coincidence, everyone who is featured on Laugh is Fun eventually dies or is already dead of totally unrelated causes. Like the Turman family. Dad, Gary Turman, was the one who had 18 extra heads grow out of his neck. Gary, his wife Lindsay, and their 2 kids tragically passed away in a car wreck on the 28th of April 1989. Melissa and Travis Youngland, the couple from the squirrel prank, went missing and were last seen on the 12th of May 1989. The couple from the pigeon prank, Macy Gershon and Kyle Parker, were both killed by a hit-and-run driver in September of 2000. Doris Carter, the woman from the Thatcher prank, passed away from ovarian cancer in 1997. And Rebecca Nash, the woman who gave birth to all of those singing celebrity cephalopods, died in childbirth in 2013. You might think that the last one had something to do with her Laugh is Fun episode due to the hospital connection, but the surgeons present when she died didn't report anything strange happening at the time. All of these deaths happen in roughly the same years that all these people had their appearances on Laugh, but it's because it's only available on streaming and video. It can't really be said what the connection is since there aren't any air dates for any of the episodes. While you might assume that these people died after their appearances on Laugh and the show is actually some kind of death curse, it's just as likely that they died before, and Laugh is Fun is somehow filmed and distributed from the great beyond. Some people even think that the people who film Laugh actually kidnap all the people who appear on the show and fake their deaths in some kind of big sinister conspiracy. Sure, I have heard that all of the people who supposedly died after being on the show have inconsistencies in their death records, and that many of their graves actually just hold empty coffins, but still, that feels totally unrealistic to me. I mean, come on, can you really picture TV's own Laffy Lafferson kidnapping anyone? He has such a friendly attitude. Like I said before, no information whatsoever exists about the way this show is made. Not even the SCP Foundation has any answers. They're still actively investigating the ways in which people get chosen to be on Laugh is Fun, as well as where it's filmed and who produces it. Talk about a really niche cult hit. I hope I've sold you on Laugh is Fun. It may not be that well known, and you might have trouble finding it, but trust me, it's the funniest prank show you'll probably ever watch. I guarantee once you get into it, it'll make you laugh and laugh and laugh. Laugh with us! Laugh with us! Laugh with us! Laugh with us! Is there any greater computer on planet Earth than the human brain? That web of almost 200 billion neurons inside your skull gives you the equivalent memory space of over 1,000 1-terabyte hard drives. Sure, the human brain might not be able to process information at the speed of the average computer, but it can regulate the movement and functions of your entire body, all while using less energy than a light bulb. That's right. Our brains are pretty impressive organic computers, but there is some stiff competition. Well, not completely stiff. You'll see. Say hello to SCP-003, also referred to as the Biological Motherboard. Hearing that name, you would be right to assume that SCP-003 is a computer formed of organic components, as opposed to man-made microchips and circuit boards. But there is a little bit more to it than that. SCP-003 is actually composed of two distinct parts, referred to as SCP-003-1 and SCP-003-2, both related, but each with a separate origin. The former, 003-1, is the machine's motherboard, whereas your ordinary home computer or laptop might have a motherboard made out of fiberglass and copper. This one is far less conventional. So what is 003-1 actually made from? The answer is living tissue. Everything from hair and fingernails to chitin, which is a substance found in the exoskeletons of some invertebrate animals. All of these components, parts that may have once belonged to a living thing, are arranged in a configuration much like that of a computer's motherboard. It sounds like something plucked out of a film by John Carpenter or David Cronenberg, doesn't it? But how or why would someone ever construct something like this? Well, the answer to that isn't clear. So far, the only answers we have come from the SCP Foundation's extensive testing of the biological motherboard. According to researchers, SCP-003-1 predates even the very earliest modern circuits by several thousands of years, meaning that whoever built it was certainly ahead of their time. Also, the motherboard is alive. Wait, did we forget to mention that? SCP-003-1 has displayed at least a low level of sentience during testing by the Foundation, not enough to be considered an active threat unless certain conditions make it dangerous. The second component of SCP-003 is 003-2, a stone tablet that 003-1 was attached to when it was first discovered. The surface of 003-2 has a number of runes carved into it, but these symbols don't match letters or characters from any known language. The runes on 003-2 are also known to regularly emit a pale, flickering pattern of light. Now, you're probably asking, how is a slab of stone able to light itself up? Well, that is because SCP-003-2 has an internal computer controlling it, and not one composed of organic parts like hair and fingernails. Somewhere within the stone is a non-biological computer, fueled by some unknown anomalous power source. The Foundation's researchers can't access the internal components of SCP-003-2 without running the high risk of damaging it, but as far as they can tell, Whatever is running this bizarre machine has been slowly losing power for centuries. The biological motherboard is also known to emit measurable levels of heat, light, and radiations of an anomalous nature. So why would someone go to the trouble of creating a computer out of living parts in anomalous stone? And what is the purpose of the biological motherboard? The SCP Foundation considers it highly probable that the stone slab of 003-2 was actually created with the intention of keeping the motherboard component, 003-1, contained. Additionally, during testing, Foundation researchers have been able to exact partially complete data from SCP-003. This data seems to refer to some sort of potential catastrophe, either in the future or one that has already occurred. As a direct result of SCP-003-1, it would seem that 003-1 and 003-2 must stay combined in order to prevent what the Foundation would deem an LK-class restructuring event. How could the biological motherboard cause an event like this? It just sounds like a partially alive flesh circuit on a stone slab. It's when the temperature around SCP-003 drops below 35 degrees Celsius that things start to get really strange. From the minute they detect a decrease in temperature, both components of SCP-003 begin to react. The biological motherboard itself starts to grow, rapidly increasing its overall size. 003-1 fuels this growth state by absorbing any nearby matter, adding anything close enough to its fleshy mass. First, it will assimilate any inorganic material, everything from particles in the atmosphere on up. 003-1 transforms these new additions to itself into the same organic matter that makes up the biological motherboard, transforming metal or plastic into dead skin cells, hair, chitin, enamel, keratin, and other similar materials. This growth state increases until SCP-003 takes on a form in the shape of an ophiuroid, also known as a brittle star, an aquatic life form similar to a starfish, with 5 long, thin appendages protruding from a central body. In the case of SCP-003, this body appears to be the computer's central processing unit. In this new form, the biological motherboard will also begin to create sensory organs that will survey the area around it for more materials to assimilate. Only 003-2, the stone slab, is immune to being converted into biological matter. Next, the second phase of transformation occurs, and SCP-003-1 begins to absorb organic matter into its mass as well, living or otherwise. If you've ever seen The Blob, then you know what this looks like, and how horrifying it would be for any person unfortunate enough to be standing too close. During this stage, SCP-003 will attempt to copy the biology of a living organism it comes into contact with, and uses this template to try and lure others towards it. However, the biological motherboard appears to use a lot of processing power to analyze and assimilate organic matter, and this can actually diminish the speed at which it increases in size. So what happens to 003-2, the stone component of SCP-003, during all of this? When the biological motherboard is growing and changing form, melding with other organisms as its fleshy mass increases, does 003-2 power its transformation? No. In fact, it tries to prevent it. That's right. The two components of SCP-003 do not work in tandem. They work against each other. As the biological motherboard starts to grow, the stone slab attached to it will emit concentrated bursts of radiation. These radioactive emissions have a counter effect on 003-1's ability to assimilate matter and increase its size, stopping the organic mass of flesh from growing and even reversing the process when the temperature is raised to over 100 degrees Celsius. What we have so far is a machine in 2 parts, one that grows and assimilates matter at lower temperatures, and the other that releases radiation to stop this happening. Naturally, the SCP Foundation counteracts the anomalous growing ability of 003-1 by keeping the biological motherboard in a heated containment environment, still attached to 003-2. Under no circumstances is the temperature of SCP-003's containment unit to drop below 35 degrees Celsius, and normally no living person is permitted to make any direct contact with the machine. However, in the event of an emergency resulting in a loss of power, Foundation staff are required to huddle skin to skin with the fleshy mass of the motherboard, in an attempt to keep it warm through their own body heat, much like how penguins huddle together for warmth. Of course, those unlucky members of personnel probably hope they can generate enough heat between them to keep 003-1 from starting to grow. Otherwise, they'll know they'll be the first that the biological motherboard will absorb. Should a member of personnel be chosen for this particularly unpleasant task of being on hand to keep 003 warm, then they will be made to submit for a full examination beforehand. No one can be allowed close to SCP-003 if they're carrying any bodily parasites like tapeworms or head lice. They would all be extra organisms for 003-1 to absorb. Foundation staff are also required to be decontaminated both before and after directly dealing with SCP-003. And of course, no member of the SCP Foundation is permitted to ever detach the biological motherboard from the stone component. Given that 003-2 is the only device capable of reducing and reversing SCP-003-1's growth, any changes in the pattern or color of its glowing ruins is to be reported to high-ranking members of the Foundation. There have been multiple incidents involving SCP-003 though, usually occurring when staff working in the Foundation's M03 Gloria research team attempt to push the boundaries of the device's anomalous properties. Their interest in the biological motherboard lies purely in seeing how the machine evolves when allowed to grow beyond its second brittle star stage. During one such incident, 003-1 was allowed to grow and restructure for just over 9 minutes, after which the containment area's temperature was lowered, and 003-2 released a massive continuous spike in radiation. Any of the new material that had been bonded to the biological motherboard dissolved, falling away and turning into a dusty residue which was then collected for testing. At this point, both 003-1 and 003-2 seemed to power down, with no detectable activity. The stone slab did not power back on until it was connected to an external power generator. When the same procedure was repeated and 003-1 re-entered its growth state, 003-2's radiation appeared to be unable to stop the motherboard from increasing in mass. When it reached 4 times its original size by assimilating any and all matter it could reach, SCP-003 then began to change form in a way that had never been observed before, forming a protective shell around 003-1. The entire living machine breached containment into the observation area, grabbing M03 Gloria researchers and its appendages. Using these M03 Gloria members, it began adding to itself and forming a new body. As it assimilated the researchers, the biological motherboard rearranged its center mass. SCP-003 then took on the form of a 3-meter-tall female humanoid, with tentacles protruding from its newly formed hair and spine. Next, the part creature, part machine began to make indecipherable sounds, trying to communicate with researchers through these rudimentary vocalizations. Somehow, perhaps through information it had absorbed from the researchers in its grasp, SCP-003 wanted to speak. What happened next? An agent, sent on orders direct from the O5 Council, was dispatched to the containment area. According to Foundation records, the agent attempted to engage in conversation with SCP-003's new form, but any data about their exchange has been expunged. Luckily, this agent was able to restore power to SCP-003's stone component, returning the room temperature to the proper containment levels, which caused 003-1 to return to its normal state. The threat recontained, all 9 members of M03 Gloria were found to be unharmed, suffering no side effects from assimilation, other than a few cases of psychological trauma. One of them, Dr. Tilda Moose, the leader of M03 Gloria, was later interviewed by the Foundation. She claimed that SCP-003 had tried to talk to the researchers, connecting with them mentally in a crude, broken language that they couldn't understand. She ripped 3 of the researchers apart and put them back together unharmed. She doesn't understand human emotion or pain, or very much about how we experience the world. Yes, I would say the containment procedures are necessary. According to Dr. Moose, SCP-003 is some unknown alien entity, one without a clear understanding of humanity. It cannot understand pain or physical sensation, yet it is bent on remaking the world into a paradise. The whole effect felt like words of some kind. I believe she wanted to see what we could understand, so she could understand us. Dr. Moose said in her interview, "She didn't have time to finish analyzing us. I don't know what would have happened if she had. Foundation researcher Marcus Hernandez was a professional in all aspects of his job. He was intelligent, being scouted for a job at the Foundation right out of college. He was brave, unyielding in the faces of the horrifying creatures and dangerous situations that working with the anomalous practically guaranteed. But most importantly, researcher Hernandez was cautious. He not only knew that keeping his hands at a fair distance from any newly discovered anomalous objects was a safe way to keep his head, he was also aware that it was sometimes better to take risks that would further his knowledge about an anomaly and how best to contain it. Sometimes those risks came with a price, like being part of the first team to study a recently discovered anomaly. To researcher Hernandez, it was better to lose the lives of the ones working to protect humanity from what lies in the dark than have any unsuspecting civilians stumble upon something potentially life-threatening. That's why he and his team took the assignment of studying SCP-1437 before anyone else in the Foundation was able to. They simply were not sure of what it was capable of, and researcher Hernandez's known attention to detail and cautious nature could best help the Foundation not only establish proper containment procedures, but also ensure that their own personnel were safe while doing so. As researcher Hernandez sat in the back of a jeep that rolled and tumbled over the arid landscape of the Mojave Desert, he reviewed what the Foundation knew about the anomaly. Unfortunately, it wasn't much. For starters, it was a 3-meter by 3-meter hole in the ground, originally thought to be an ordinary cave. As a result of its deceiving appearance, the anomaly went unnoticed for decades, until the Foundation picked up on a local story that was the talk of the town for a small group of camping and hiking hobbyists in Nevada. A camper, while out exploring and trekking through the dry dunes of the Mojave, was struck in the back of the neck with a U.S. quarter. While the object by itself is harmless, it came flying at the camper's body at an incredibly high speed, shooting from a large hole in the ground and striking hard enough to break the skin and wedge itself inside the camper's neck. After reaching the local hospital and getting the coin removed, it still left a small scar across the back of the camper's head. This unusual event prompted Foundation reconnaissance, which turned out to be entirely warranted, as observation of the surrounding area found several more objects buried around the area that were believed to have emerged from the hole, now designated as SCP-1437. A small canoe decorated with luminescent patterns, a calculator that added and subtracted letters instead of numbers, and a rotten apple core were all objects strewn around the immediate area. And if that's not strange enough, attempts to map out the hole failed, as all measuring equipment was lost after reaching a certain depth. Before the initial observation team picked up and left, SCP-1437 shot out large quantities of rock and dirt for over an hour, confirming that objects emerged from the hole at high speeds. Chemical analysis of the objects found around the area showed that they were composed of materials either unknown or not commonly found on Earth to warrant use in mass production. The observation team came up with a hypothesis. SCP-1437 was a hole that led to a parallel universe, and the objects it shot out originated in said location. Researcher Hernandez knew that this was just a hypothesis, but he had reviewed the lab results himself. Those objects certainly did not come from anywhere on Earth, and if the hole functioned as a gateway between worlds, that could explain why the measuring equipment was lost after a certain point. The jeep came to a stop, and when researcher Hernandez stepped out, he came face to face with SCP-1437, a large hole sitting in the Mojave Desert. His crew was already hard at work, surveying and excavating the surrounding area for any other objects the hole had shot out that had been lost to time. A mobile analysis lab tent was set up in the distance, as well as several trailers for personnel living on site. Researcher Hernandez's personal decision to not use D-Class personnel in his research meant that each risk the SCP-1437 team took had to be calculated differently. They wouldn't send a person into the hole and risk loss of life when a drone could serve the same function without the potential drawbacks. But still, the initial observation team lost all of their equipment while trying to measure SCP-1437's depth. Why waste an expensive drone when the result would most likely turn out the same? It was these decisions that earned Hernandez's fame and respect at the Foundation, and over the next few weeks, his team was able to develop a wide knowledge base regarding SCP-1437 and establish safe containment procedures to keep the anomaly hidden from the public and easy to work with for Foundation personnel. First, a 2-meter-tall electric fencing unit was built around the perimeter of SCP-1437. This fence would not only keep unwanted trespassers out, but also had defensive capabilities due to the harmful electrical charge it could emit upon contact with an object. Groups of 3 security guard personnel were assigned to patrol this fence at all times, and they were instructed to deal with any trespassers through standard Foundation protocol. They would be taken into custody, interrogated, and as long as they were unaware of SCP-1437's anomalous properties, given a healthy dose of amnestics and released back into the general public. Anything that emerged from SCP-1437, be it a physical object or a living organism, would be cataloged by the Foundation and tested immediately for any potential hazards before further analysis could begin. If found to be safe, the items would be studied as much as possible. If not, they were stowed away in an area intended to keep them contained until a safe way to examine them was found. But perhaps the most important containment procedure researcher Hernandez established was the forbiddance of testing with SCP-1437. Due to the anomaly's mysterious nature and incredibly likely potential connection to parallel universes, testing could have grave and unforeseen consequences. When dealing with alternate or parallel timelines or realities, the Foundation is incredibly cautious and only interacts in ways that they're absolutely sure will not have any unexpected damage on baseline reality. That, and researcher Hernandez wasn't exactly keen on attracting the attention of these parallel universes without a solid understanding of who and what they were. As he would come to find, this inclination proved to be beneficial. As the team observed SCP-1437, they documented a number of notable objects that emerged from the hull, each supposedly originating from a parallel world. The first of which, however, was not anything the team hadn't seen before. The initial observation team sent to test whether SCP-1437 was actually anomalous had observed the hull emitting a mass of rock and dirt. For over an hour, SCP-1437 spewed earth and materials without stopping, filling the surrounding areas with debris. Since this was before the research team theorized the hull was connected to parallel realities, they weren't sure what to make of it. Was it a natural eruption? A poorly documented earthquake that somehow sent chunks of rock and dirt to the surface and shooting out of the hole? Though somewhat stumped, researcher Hernandez's team eventually came to a single solid conclusion. If SCP-1437 led to a parallel world or worlds, whoever was on the other side of the hole may have been attempting to fill it using natural materials. If they were attempting to fill it, could they be trying to contain it? Did the parallel world on the other side of SCP-1437 have its own foundation? This sudden thought gave researcher Hernandez pause and made him reconsider his hands-off approach to SCP-1437. Should his team attempt to contact whoever was on the other side? If it was a parallel branch of the Foundation, this behavior would be encouraged. The Foundation communicated with alternate versions of itself in time and space all of the time. The Department of Temporal Anomalies was built around this premise, but these were exceptions, not the rules. And communication with alternate foundations was always carried out with utmost safety and precaution. It was only done when there was a certainty that risk would be avoided. Researcher Hernandez was sure he made the correct decision, and he would stray away from attempting to contact those on the other side of the anomaly, even if they were another world's incarnation of the SCP Foundation. Weeks later, researcher Hernandez was awoken in the middle of the night by an excited assistant who, after calming herself down, informed him that SCP-1437 had spat out a new object. You have to forgive her. If you were out in the desert for weeks staring at a hole waiting for it to do something and it eventually did it, you'd be pretty excited too. When researcher Hernandez ran outside to see what the team was freaking out about, he could have jumped for joy too. SCP-1437 wasn't spitting out rocks and dirt anymore. This time, it was a map, clearly illustrated to depict the continent of North America. But upon closer inspection, the team noticed some very apparent differences from a traditional map in the geography of our world. The map was written entirely in Spanish, and the names of countries and states it listed didn't match their existing counterparts. In fact, the entire borderlines of the map were mismatched, out of place, and radically different from anything resembling North America. It listed the government of the entire continent of North America as La República Popular de Aguas Nuevas, or when translated to English, the People's Republic of New Waters. This exciting find was logged and archived, and it was only the first of a series of objects that emerged from SCP-1437. A few days later, another object was documented. This time, it was a photograph. After initial scans determined the object to be safe to view, not harboring any dangerous mimetic triggers upon viewing or anything of that nature, the team analyzed the picture to the best of their abilities. They saw a breathtaking vista of a city skyline, unlike anything possible on this world. Intertwined with buildings were massive structures that appeared to be made out of coral. They wrapped around skyscrapers, branching from the ground and sometimes emerging from the buildings themselves. The coral broke through the tops of the tallest buildings, putting the man-made titans to shame. In the far background, a massive flying creature can be seen, peacefully floating through the air. This otherworldly visual overwhelmed the team, but after the initial shock wore down, a keen-eyed junior researcher pointed out that many of the buildings resembled known landmarks, though they were radically altered in noticeable ways. This wasn't just any city. It was New York City, only this time with coral and giant floating creatures. Exactly what the Big Apple's been missing this entire time. But this was still comprehensible and understandable for the Foundation. SCP-1437's true weirdness was still yet to come. A few days after the photograph emerged, SCP-1437 shot out a truly peculiar find. Researcher Hernandez and his team were stumped as to what its purpose was and what it signified, but they determined the objects to be completely safe and archived them regardless. The items in question were a series of discs made from solid gold, varying in size but never being obscenely large. Accompanying the disc was a sheet of paper that read, "Please send more rain." The Foundation was understandably puzzled. One working theory researcher Hernandez put together was that whoever was on the opposite side of SCP-1437 was paying tribute to the whole as a form of worship and was asking the almighty beings on the other side to send more rain for whatever reason. While the Foundation didn't exactly send the rain over themselves, whoever sent that request was probably pleased when a thunderstorm the next week sent torrents of rainwater into SCP-1437. We hope they're happy. The most notable discoveries that emerged from SCP-1437 occurred over a multi-year period. Previously, the research team theorized that SCP-1437 was connected to a single reality, and that whoever was on the other side of it was sending objects through, either by chance or by means of communication. This discovery proved that there wasn't just one parallel world connecting to SCP-1437, but many, an unknown amount, in fact. The items in question this time weren't just objects, but human cadavers. One by one over the years, interspaced between the various oddities that SCP-1437 also spat out were human corpses, dead on arrival. The bodies were clad in Foundation-issue D-Class uniforms, though with some slight variations. This proved that the worlds connected to SCP-1437 were, in fact, alternate versions of the Foundation, or at least some of the worlds, as there was no way to tell who, what, or where the objects that emerged from SCP-1437 came from. Researcher Hernandez and his team examined the bodies with care and determined that they were dead long before they hit the ground, and that the gateway between worlds triggered the cause of death as they traveled between realities. Inside the D-Class jumpsuits, the team discovered pieces of paper, manuscripts that detailed their world's Foundation's documentation on SCP-1437. This deliberate inclusion of documentation signaled to the research team that there was an attempt at communication and cooperation from one world's Foundation to theirs. But why? The first body was clearly in adequate physical condition. It was protected due to being clothed in a pressure suit with an attached oxygen supply. The documentation read similarly to the SCP Foundation's documentation, though instead of special containment procedures and an object class, SCP-1437 was given a safety rating and safety containment procedures. These detail the Foundation that was giving civilians tours of their anomalies, where they could take photographs and even get close enough to view the anomaly from a close distance. The rest of the file was similar to what Hernandez's team recorded, and listed the following objects as those that emerged from SCP-1437. One small pyramid composed of concrete, large quantities of dirt and rocks, a landscape painting, believed to be a location in Scotland. According to the painting, its originating universe's sun is blue and its sky yellow. Several discs made from solid gold. Accompanying the discs was a sheet of paper reading, "Please stop plague." A photograph of several scientists. All scientists pictured have unusually long fingers, estimated to be nearly 25 centimeters long. A sheet of paper reading, "Thank you, please send more gifts." The file continued with a notice explaining that the bodies of orange jumpsuited individuals holding documentation of the anomaly emerged from the hole. The file's unfamiliarity with jumpsuits indicate that this world lacks a concept of D-class personnel. The file mentions that, on the 15th of August 2012, a volunteer from the Foundation, Marco Perton, entered SCP-1437 wearing safety gear, taking with him a copy of this document. The second D-class body examined by Hernandez's team was branded with the phrase, "Property of the SCP Corporation." The file described an item with a threat level of little, and a Foundation that was more focused on profit than containment. After objects emerged from the hole, they were authorized to be sold to any interested collectors. Objects described by this version of the Foundation include a statue of what is believed to be a reptilian entity sporting numerous eyes and tails, large quantities of dirt and rocks, a glass bottle of water, a human femur covered in saliva, a cube comprised of several smaller cubes, all of which are different colors, purpose unknown, a soccer ball, ball only has 5 sides. The file included the SCP Corporation describing D-Class showing up, as they did in other worlds, and then the Corporation happily sending several D-Classes of their own through the hole in an attempt to communicate with whoever was on the other side. The third D-Class body examined was heavily bandaged and appeared to be blinded. There were lacerations on its arms and legs, and its tongue had been removed. The file described a Foundation akin to a religious cult. SCP-1437 was given a heathen level of unforgivable, and its holding measures described a high priest having to bless the hole every 2 years, and the need to perform blood sacrifices into it to ward off any demons. The wild incarnation of the Foundation interpreted SCP-1437 as a portal to the underworld, and described a list of objects emerging from it. It read as follows: several discs made from solid gold. Accompanying the disc was a sheet of paper reading, "Please kill foes." Large quantities of dirt and rocks, believed to be an attempt by demons to harm the High Priest, who was present at the holding site at the time. The broken remains of a human arm, covered in saliva. A photograph of a metal bird flying away from a city. What appears to be a large mushroom is visible behind the bird, believed to be an attempt by demons at mocking us. A human eye which moved when touched, believed to be a lesser demon, was burnt immediately. Unlike the other worlds, when this one received D-Classes through SCP-1437, the religious fanatics believed the bodies to be demons wearing the skin of men, and threw the bodies back in the hole. The next D-Class body observed by Hernandez's team was the most curious. It was a heavily emaciated child, who had apparently been lobotomized. It described a Foundation that sounds more like an organization out of a dystopian science fiction novel than anything else. The file spoke of a group of beings referred to as our masters above all, which the Foundation answered to. Any objects emerging from SCP-1437 were brought before the Masters. Any trespassers were interrogated by the Masters. This Foundation believed the objects SCP-1437 shot out were gifts for the Masters. Their list reads as follows: 1. Diamond. Large quantities of dirt and rocks. Bark from the extinct Quercus buckii, the lower half of a human body. Delivering to supervising servant of our Masters above. It is currently unknown how the gift sender was aware of the diet of our Masters above. A document was sent into SCP-1437 thanking the gift giver for the object and requesting further tributes to our Masters above. A bottle of human-intended wine. While they certainly enjoyed the food of the human body, the wine was clearly misinterpreted. For whatever reason, this Foundation interpreted the wine as an assassination attempt on the Masters above all. As a result, they sent a large, anomalously powered explosive through SCP-1437 and into the world of an unsuspecting Foundation. The file continues with a notice from this Foundation's O5-1 which reads, "This is a reminder of why we must be vigilant in our containment procedures. From now on, I don't want any of these gifts being taken out of containment. They are a clear and present danger to our Masters above." Looks like researcher Hernandez had the correct idea about not wanting to risk experimenting with SCP-1437, attracting the attention of a reality where the almighty O5 Council answers to an even more powerful human-eating group of masters above all? No thank you. This reality's foundation is perfectly content alone. There's something out there, stalking, watching, lying in wait for the right moment. It can be anywhere, disappear in the blink of an eye, and reappear somewhere else, always poised and ready to strike. The SCP Foundation has it locked up for now. They keep a tracking tag fixed to it, so they can find it whenever it gets out. And believe us, it does get out. So when it does, you should watch your back, keep your wits about you, and check over your shoulder if you hear something move. If you aren't careful, it might come for you. If you let your guard slip, even for just a second, you could be next. McLean, Virginia. It's hardly a hotbed of anomalous activity, Viola thought to herself as she pulled up at an unassuming townhouse. When she first joined the SCP Foundation, Field Agent Smithy had imagined her life to be full of adventure, battling anomalous monsters and entities with the power to rewrite reality itself. Instead, she had unwittingly pulled a short straw somewhere along the way, and now got saddled with this, retrieving an anomaly that had gone missing. Viola had no idea what to expect. All she had been told was that according to its tracking tag, the anomaly had teleported into one of 3 potential relocation sites, or PRSs. She just happened to be the closest available field agent station nearby, and was instructed to drive over and collect it and return the escaped SCP to the Foundation. They had told Agent Smithy it was harmless, putting her guard right down as she stepped inside the house. She wasn't prepared for the ambush that awaited her. The house, codenamed PRS Townhouse, was silent, practically abandoned as she made her sweep. Room by room, Viola was methodically checking her corners, looking under beds, inside cupboards, behind couches, on top of shelves, making sure she'd covered every single inch of the house. Whatever this anomaly was, it was good at hiding. Before long, Agent Smithy had checked the whole house from top to bottom and had found nothing. No sight of the elusive SCP. With no idea where it was, Viola went into the kitchen. She figured she might as well see if there was anything to eat in this place. Maybe it had already gone, she thought. She'd have to check in with base and see if the tracking tag was still active at this location. This thing could teleport, after all. It could be sunbathing in Cancun by now, drinking a pina colada out of a coconut with a tiny umbrella. Oh, wouldn't that be the life? Viola approached the refrigerator and casually placed her hand on the door. With no idea what was waiting for her inside, she pulled it open and was immediately hit in the face with a pillow. It wasn't traveling at any substantial speed. In fact, it was like having been lightly thrown by a human hand more than anything else. It didn't knock Field Agent Smithy back or send her reeling, or have enough force to cause any injury. Instead, the pillow just softly impacted Viola's face, giving a little squeak, like a dog toy would before it lazily fell onto the kitchen floor. Fixed to one side of it was a post-it note with a crudely drawn face that glared up at her with a jagged frown. Viola sighed, mildly annoyed that she'd just had a pillow thrown at her now, after having spent half an hour searching the house. Leaning down, she picked it up and radioed the Foundation. She'd found SCP-3832. But it didn't end there. Oh no. After they got the anomaly safely back in its containment locker, it wasn't long before the Foundation was soon inundated with more pillowy pandemonium. Nobody was safe from being the next victim of a sudden ambush by SCP-3832. Not even a harmless, unassuming researcher like Dr. Franklin Prangley. He had just been going about his day, checking containment procedures were all in place, running a few tests on a few SCPs. The usual stuff for a scientist working at Site-64. That's when the call went out over the comm system. It had happened again. SCP-3832 had vanished from the locker it was usually kept secure in. While on the outside, it looked like little more than an ordinary cushion, this anomaly was the ultimate hunter, displaying behavior almost exactly like that of various highly evolved ambush predators in the wild. And now this hunter was loose again, and it was open season on the Foundation staff. This time it hadn't gone far, having only teleported to a different part of Site-64. As he would soon discover, the cunning cushion was hiding just above Dr. Prangley's locker, waiting for the researcher to return to his office. Then, when he was close enough, SCP-3832 would strike. But the next would-be victim of the predatory pillow had an advantage. The location tracking tag that the Foundation had affixed to the pillow proved to be its downfall, giving Prangley an approximate fix on its whereabouts. Gently pushing his office door open, he instantly spotted it on top of his office locker, ready to pounce on him the moment he got close enough. Slowly and methodically, Dr. Prangley edged around his office, reaching for a meter stick he kept by his desk. With his chosen weapon in hand, the Foundation researcher stepped closer to his locker, eyes fixed on SCP-3832. He was brandishing the wooden meter stick in both hands, carrying it like an early caveman with a handcrafted spear. At that moment, Dr. Franklin Prangley was locked in the dichotomy between predator and prey, that age-old dance, a battle that had raged for almost all of time itself. Man versus pillow. We've all been there, haven't we? Suddenly striking first, Franklin took a sharp swipe at SCP-3832 with his meter stick. He broke out with a smile of glee as the pillow was toppled from its vantage point. It no longer had the high ground over him. Employing a swift offense as the best defense, the noble Dr. Prangley had felled SCP-3832 in one quick, preemptive strike. Or so he thought. As the old saying goes, pride goeth before the fall. Not sooner had it landed in a heap on the office floor than SCP-3832 launched itself back up and limply hit Franklin square in the stomach. He let out a low grunt as the pillow connected with his lower abdomen and squeaked again, announcing to the world that SCP-3832 had just claimed its latest victim. Dr. Prangley might never get over that particular humiliation. If he's eaten by SCP-682 in a week, it will be a merciful reprieve. No one could end this crafty cushion's reign of terror. To stand against this goose feather-filled hunter was to risk certain death. Well, death by embarrassment, at least, which some would argue is honestly worse. Security Officer Jennifer Blair was never the same after it happened to her. It was waiting for her behind the coffee machine in the Site-64 break room. She'd gone in there for a quick cup, just to recharge her energy levels with a boost of caffeine, before getting back to her post guarding the containment level. Poor Jen, she never saw it coming. SCP-3832 leaped from its latest hiding place, striking Officer Blair right in her unprotected ankle. The sudden vicious attack from the polyester cover-wielding persecutor caught her completely unguarded, which was somewhat ironic for a member of the Foundation's security personnel. But Security Officer Jennifer Blake had no time to laugh at the irony there. Punctuated by that same squeaking sound, the sudden impact of the pillow colliding with her ankle caused her to stumble. Not fall, mind you. She only lost balance on one leg and was able to quickly steady herself immediately after. But it was enough, just enough, for her coffee to spill. If you need a moment to compose yourself after that horrifying revelation, we'd understand. It's one of the more disturbing things we've shared on this normally family-friendly channel. Leave a comment with a key phrase #JusticeForJen so this poor SCP Foundation security officer knows she's in your thoughts and prayers after this harrowing incident. Everyone okay now? Okay, good. Back to the story at hand. The incident caused Jen to suffer a few minor first-degree burns on her hand and wrist, requiring a 15-minute treatment in the Site-64 infirmary, which the medic described as the worst relatively minor burns I've ever seen. While her external injuries might not have taken much time to heal, now Officer Blake had to bring instant coffee from home to work in a thermos flask. Can you imagine such horror? It stretches the human imagination to even compensate for the level of terror it inspires in our hearts and souls. Everywhere you looked, Site-64 staff were being struck down left, right, and center. Mildly inconvenienced without warning by non-lethal and mostly harmless ambushes from SCP-3832. During another relocation incident, the predatory pillow teleported itself back to the location known as PRS Townhouse in McLean, Virginia. Once again, Field Agent Viola Smithy was dispatched to the scene to retrieve the elusive pillow. Only this time, she had learned from her last encounter. She brought backup. specifically one other field officer named Gordon Gompton, to hopefully give the cunning cushion its critical comeuppance. Both field agents knew one of them would have to take the hit, and Gordon stepped up to the task. After all, it had already got Viola once before. It was his turn to face the nightmare that was SCP-3832 head-on. They entered the townhouse, Agent Gompton taking the lead, acting as a human shield against any oncoming pillowy projectiles. Just as they expected, and as it had before, the ambush took place not long after, with SCP-3832 ineffectively hurling itself from its hiding place. But at the last possible second, Gordon ducked out of the way. It was purely instinctive, but it left Viola at the mercy of the oncoming cushion. It was a betrayal of truly Shakespearean proportions, playing out in real time. Marginally vexed at being hit a second time with the pillow, Agent Smithy immediately decided to claim her well-earned revenge. Grabbing the nearest safe object, which happened to be SCP-3832 itself, she hurled it directly at her fellow field operative. It collided with his head with another squeak, the combined sight and sound causing Viola to burst out laughing. Wearing a crafty smirk, Gordon grabbed the pillow and threw it back at her, the same thing happening. The pair of them kept at it, repeatedly throwing SCP-3832 at each other again and again. Every time the same squeaking filled the air, followed by more laughing from the two agents. As they continued their pillowy fight, SCP-3832 underwent a change that nobody at the SCP Foundation had ever witnessed before. With every throw, hitting either Agent Smithy or Agent Gompton with its characteristic squeaking noise, the face drawn on the post-it note that was permanently stuck to SCP-3832 began to change. Usually the sticky paper depicted a jagged hand-drawn frowny face, an upturned mouth and eyebrows pointing inward in attack formation. A truly terrifying countenance to behold. It also turned out that it was impossible to remove the post-it note without causing the pillow to teleport again. However, when it was being thrown about, used in a pillow fight between two Foundation field agents, joining in a rare moment of childlike joy, the face of SCP-3832 began to change. The frown was replaced with the unmistakable curvature of a smile, those angry attack eyebrows completely vanishing as the pillow was pleasantly pelted from Agent Viola Smithy to Agent Gordon Gompton. Eventually, after they'd had their fun, the two operatives were duty-bound to return the now grinning cushion to the Foundation. They reported their findings to researchers, many of whom seemed eager to take part in tests replicating this incident, either because they were looking to blow off some steam with a nice wholesome pillow fight, or because they wanted to make SCP-3832 smile again. It didn't take long for the fearsome piece of feathered-filled furniture to get back to its old tricks, though. After all, you can't teach an old pillow new tricks. And as for its next unsuspecting victim, the next would be none other than Director of Site-64 himself, one Edgar Hallman. That's right. Not even one of the highest-ranked members of Foundation staff stationed at that particular facility was exempt from falling prey to the dreaded pillow. Having once again disappeared from the confines of its locker, SCP-3832 subsequently concealed itself under the desk in Director Holman's office, laying in wait to pounce at its prey. As he pulled up his chair to sit down, the site director was met with a soft, cushiony impact to his shins. Any further up and it could have caused serious damage. He was lucky that dastardly pillow didn't crease his well-ironed slacks. Then there was the relocation event that became known as Incident 3832-NR1. A few key differences set this particular occurrence apart from the others on SCP-3832's calamitous cacophony of concealed cushion carnage. Say that 5 times fast. For one, it is what directly led to the first of a few rare instances of where the post-it-faced pillow teleported itself to a location now known as PRS Truffle, the designation given to St. John's Chocolate Factory in Portland, Oregon. Why a saint had a chocolate factory, we may never know, but I digress. Since becoming a potential relocation site that SCP-3832 is able to teleport itself to, the factory had to be seized by the SCP Foundation, where it had once offered tours to the public to present them with all the wonders of the sweet tooth process of making chocolate. The gates now remained closed, with the false promises that St. John's Chocolate Factory was under new management, keeping people out. Entire floors that could easily be accessed by someone trying to swipe a sample or two have now been completely cleared out by the Foundation, with not a stick of furniture left in the place for anyone to steal, or for SCP-3832 to hide behind. On the 14th of February, St. Valentine's Day 2017, Foundation technicians had been working on repairing a glitch that had been disrupting SCP-3832's tracking tag. It was during that moment that the wily polyester pillow teleported out of its locker at Site-64 once again, vanishing and reappearing in the trunk of a car belonging to a member of personnel. Now, for security reasons, the name of the staff member has been censored, letting her retain her anonymity, and probably whatever is left of her dignity too. We'll just call her Big Sister, which is how the file on the highly classified SCP archive refers to her. Up until this point, the researchers at the SCP Foundation have never known SCP-3832 to have the ability to teleport itself into a moving vehicle. Teleportation is hard enough at the best of times. Seriously, you try shifting every atom of your body from one spot to another without getting stuck in a wall. And yet, the crafty cushion made the switch effortlessly, relocating itself into the back of Big Sister's car without her noticing. And to her credit, she had other things on her mind. She just finished a long day's work at Site-64, and she needed to pick something up for a special someone. It was Valentine's Day after all. As she drove away, Big Sister was completely oblivious to the fact that SCP-3832 could apparently now teleport itself into moving vehicles. The research team studying the pillow and even the security staff she passed at the front gate were equally unaware. Making her way further and further from Site-64, Big Sister pulled onto the freeway, nervously checking her watch. She desperately hoped she could get there in time before the factory closed, and that they'd still have a box left. They had to, right? Who sells out of chocolate on Valentine's Day? It's their biggest sales day of the year, save for perhaps Easter Sunday. Getting closer to St. John's Chocolate Factory, Big Sister could see from a distance that the lights were still on. She relaxed in the driver's seat, breathing a sigh of relief that she'd made it in good time. Her thoughts quickly turned to her sweetheart, imagining the look of delight on their face when she got home and presented them with a shiny, heart-shaped box, filled with a delicious assortment of confectionaries. Parking up, she dashed inside, the last person in before closing time. Little did she know what was still lurking in the trunk of her car, like the urban legend of the axe-wielding killer in the back seat. With her romantic holiday gesture of a box of chocolates all paid for and tucked securely under her arm, Big Sister made her way back to the car. Then, a thought struck her. A terrible thought. She couldn't just leave this in the car. The surprise would be totally ruined if her significant other could see what she'd got for them. There was only one thing for it. The box of chocolates needed to be hidden when she got home. And where else do you think to hide something in a car? In the trunk, of course. As Big Sister unlocked the back and lifted up the trunk lid, a concealed cushion stealth attack of pure pillow force struck her. SCP-3832 launched itself from its hiding place, only to collide with the box that Big Sis was carrying, catching her completely by surprise. Making its signature squeak, the predatory pillow knocked the box sharply upwards into the air and, in a cruel twist of fate, sent the pointed edge of the heart straight into Big Sister's face. The tapered tip was propelled straight into her mouth, chipping her front tooth, as SCP-3832 landed on the ground of the parking lot. It was the most brutally violent attack that SCP-3832 had ever conducted, shocking everyone at the SCP Foundation with its sheer wanton ferocity. Making a call to the SCP Foundation, Big Sister requested a recovery team to come and collect the troublesome cushion, after picking up the present for her Valentine and the fragment of her tooth that it had rather unceremoniously knocked out. Sighing, she leaned against the rear bumper of her car, keeping an eye on SCP-3832 while she waited for the recovery team to arrive. What a way to spend Valentine's Day, Big Sister thought to herself, worried about what her partner would say when she got home late with a chipped tooth. Then she noticed something that, while it didn't fix the situation, at least made her feel a little less bad about it. The post-it note face of SCP-3832 had changed once again, Big Sister grabbed her phone from her pocket to take a picture of it so she could hand it over as evidence to the research team. Instead of its normal frown scribbled across the sticky note, SCP-3832's hand-drawn expression had become an almost bashful, dimpled smile with a big pair of cartoon hearts in its eyes. So if you take anything away from this video, it should be this gentle reminder. The chances of you being ambushed and pounced upon by a pillow with a post-it note for a face are, well, statistically speaking, the chances are pretty slim, but they're never zero either. You really should keep your wits about you. Stay alert. Make sure you check for movement when you leave every room, and look under tables and even in your refrigerator just to be safe. And if you see something moving out of the corner of your eye, even just for a split second, then you too might just get hit in the face by a pillow. The SCP Foundation has a reputation for cold, inhumane conditions. But being contained as an anomalous human doesn't mean your stay inside a secure facility has to be as bad as it might seem at first. Of course, more dangerous anomalous entities, such as SCP-076, codenamed Able, are locked away in a containment chamber outfitted with maximum security precautions, and guarded by the Foundation's most well-trained and heavily armed personnel. But not every anomaly poses a danger, and the Foundation realizes that. Sure, the monsters like SCP-106 or SCP-096, who need no introduction, aren't exactly treated to a bed and breakfast every morning, but those lower on the danger scale can get pretty comfortable inside their new home, depending on how well they're behaved and how little of a threat they pose, of course. Take for instance SCP-076's less violent brother, SCP-073, also known as Kane. SCP-073 is peaceful, a complete contrast to SCP-076's destructive fits of violent enrage, and as a result, he's treated like nearly any other low-threat anomalous humanoid. Amenities, clothes, maybe even some time in the Foundation's recreational spaces if they're extra well-behaved. It's true that the Foundation has been doing a lot for the anomalies it contains, especially in recent years. After all, anomalies contained by the Foundation are, containment breaches aside, supposed to be contained for life. The least the Foundation can do with all of their seemingly infinite money and funding is show them an easier time while they're in there. Sometimes anomalous humanoids are integrated into the Foundation's command structure, such is the case with the mysterious Dr. Clef, a former Global Occult Coalition agent turned Foundation operative with reality-bending powers and a penchant for neutralizing dangerous anomalies. Or Dr. Jack Bright, who continued to work as a Foundation researcher following an accident with SCP-963, an amulet that made his consciousness immortal. Or Kane Pathos Crow, once an ordinary Foundation scientist, now a golden retriever blessed with superintelligence, thanks to an experiment gone wrong, or right, depending on who you ask. It is true, the Foundation is definitely more accepting of the anomalous than it may initially seem. Let's take a look at a particularly notable anomaly contained by the Foundation. SCP-166 can be seen as a baseline example of how the Foundation treats the average humanoid anomaly that doesn't pose a significant threat to the organization or society at large. SCP-166 is contained at the famous Site-19, inside a hermetically sealed antechamber outfitted with an industrial air purifier. Personnel assigned to SCP-166's containment chamber must wear specially designated biohazard suits before entering, and keep them on at all times, lest they succumb to SCP-166's anomalous effects. SCP-166 is a teenage girl of European descent, possessing certain bodily features found on a reindeer. She has antlers, hooved feet, and a short tail. All that's missing is a red nose, right? But despite looking like one of Santa's most trusted four-legged helpers, SCP-166 has little to do with the animal. In fact, scans of her DNA reveal no irregular genetic traits. To the instruments used to record such things, she is a completely ordinary human. Her reindeer features are, according to some Foundation theorists, a reflection of her connection with nature and a remnant of her past. But we'll get to that. Aside from her fluffy parts, what makes SCP-166 so anomalous? As it turns out, SCP-166 possesses an incredibly strong anomalous ability. Any artificial objects, meaning those that are man-made, within a 15-meter radius of SCP-166 will return to an unworked state, For example, a car placed within SCP-166's range will return to a composite of paint, metals, leather, and plastics over time. These higher complexity objects, such as vehicles or electronics, are affected more quickly by SCP-166, with degradation of their metallic components giving out and causing massive structural failure, resulting in an unusable object. More natural objects made of rudimentary materials, such as stone buildings and products made of organic materials, will decay at a much slower, nearly imperceptible rate. So SCP-166's containment chamber and containment solution is more than safe, though it might need to be repaired and touched up over the years. SCP-166 is very in touch with nature, as her appearance would suggest. In fact, in areas where objects degraded as a result of her influence, flowers and plant growth will begin to appear. Sometimes this foliage will grow in places that should otherwise be impossible for it to, such as ID scanners or security cameras. You could imagine that the inside of the chamber is practically a botanical garden. Still, the Foundation has to be careful with how SCP-166's containment chamber is constructed and who enters it, as the degrading Deer Girl harbors a particular sensitivity to artificial materials and pollutants, such as smoke or pesticides. Inhalation of or contact with one of these airy substances causes SCP-166 to grow ulcers and suffer symptoms of asthma attacks. Even being in close proximity with a smoker can cause SCP-166 pain, with one instance prompting a severe asthma attack despite the Foundation doctor in question having not smoked a cigarette in over 3 weeks. If you need another reason to stay away from smoking, do it for SCP-166. Isn't she adorable? You wouldn't want to give her a panic attack, would you? Not only are SCP-166's visitors limited and screened beforehand, but her clothing consists of organic cloth so as not to trigger a degradation effect. All of her meals must be prepared by a trained Foundation chef and followed according to a specific set of guidelines, with as little inorganic additives as possible. The Foundation has to be a bit more careful than usual with the items requested by SCP-166. Not only due to her anomalous ability to degrade objects, but due to her mysterious past and connection with a small convent of nuns in Ireland. We'll explain. You see, like most humanoid anomalies, the Foundation has allowed SCP-166 to put in requests for personal items she might find missing from her containment. Now, the Foundation may deny these items for a variety of reasons, but there's also a chance they won't. To date, SCP-166 has requested a copy of the Holy Bible, a Catholic rosary, and various books and magazines involving religious content, all of which were approved by Site-19's director, Sophia Light. SCP-166 also requested access to a Catholic priest for confession, mass, and other sacraments. This request was initially denied, but later reapproved after Chaplain Davis, an ordained member of the clergy working with the Foundation, agreed to meet with SCP-166 on a bi-weekly schedule, every other Sunday. SCP-166 also requested a telephone, which she intended to use to contact the Abbess of Our Lady of Mercy Convent, a cloistered society of nuns in County Galway, Ireland. This request was a little more complicated to process. At first, it was denied, then granted, and then denied again after a reconsideration by Director Light. But why did SCP-166 want this item? What connection could the Deer Girl have to a group of nuns in Ireland? The answers lie in the Foundation's discovery of SCP-166. SCP-166 was discovered in the Our Lady of Mercy Convent in County Galway, Ireland, where the girl had been living since infancy. Her strange appearance and abilities initially made her the subject of scrutiny by the sisters who lived there, but she was taken care of and raised as a member of the Catholic faith. When the Foundation was alerted to SCP-166's existence, a defecting Global Occult Coalition agent operating under the codename Ukulele, who is now in the process of joining the Foundation, confirmed that he recognized SCP-166. He knew that SCP-166 was the child of an incredibly dangerous entity, classified by the Global Occult Coalition as Threat Entity 9927 Black, a being codenamed the Goddess. The Goddess also was being pursued by the SCP Foundation and given a designation as an SCP object, though its number and the exact details of the file have been redacted by the Foundation for security purposes. What we do know is that the Goddess was a seriously dangerous entity, and both parties were dedicating as many resources as possible to its capture, containment, or neutralization. The conflict between the Goddess, the Global Occult Coalition, and the SCP Foundation came to a head during an event known as the Cornwall Incident. The Goddess's file, which was received and archived by the SCP Foundation, has a portion describing SCP-166, which reads as follows. Threat entity is the child of incarnated LTE-9927 Black, the Goddess, and an unknown father. While it strongly resembles its mother and shares its animalistic features, it lacks the extreme bestial appearance of 9927 Black, possesses minor chlorokinetic abilities, but primary reason for threat entity classification is the instinctive knowledge and eligibility to enact occult procedure Clockwork Blackchild Havilah, a worldwide ritual working that would irreversibly regress human civilization to Neolithic standards. Strike Team Lancelot neutralized 9927 Black in England during an operation which would later be known as the infamous Cornwall Incident, but were unable to confirm the liquidation of 9927 Blackchild due to the death of the strike leader, Agent Ukulele. Ukulele was posthumously awarded the Silver Aegis for his lifelong service to humanity. As the file stated, SCP-166 is the child of the Goddess, and the reason for her anomalous degradation abilities is so that she can enact them on the world and fulfill her mother's unholy mission, a ritual that would regress society to prehistoric times, ridding the world of modern technology and man-made creations. Why the Goddess wanted to carry out this ritual is unknown, but SCP-166 was her key to achieving her primitive desires. Through her child, she could reach her goals, but the Cornwall Incident threw a wrench in the Goddess's plans. Agent Ukulele, a global occult agent famous for decommissioning dangerous anomalies, was tasked with killing SCP-166. Perhaps it was her human appearance, or the fact that she was only a small child, or even something that lay even deeper. Ukulele could not bring himself to terminate SCP-166. He defected from the Global Occult Coalition, faking his death and taking SCP-166 alongside him. Entrusting her care to the convent of nuns, Ukulele made himself scarce, relieved that SCP-166 was safe. After being free from the Global Occult Coalition's grasp, Ukulele was unsure of what to do with his life. Taking the name Alto Clef, Ukulele had rid his previous identity from the anomalous world and was prepared to start a new life. But he couldn't let SCP-166 live unattended. What if the Global Occult Coalition found her and terminated her in an act that would finish what they had started all those years ago? What if the Foundation discovered her? He didn't want to risk the girl being put into a life of containment that she never wanted. Clef decided that he made the best decision and kept SCP-166's existence to himself as best he could. But his hand was forced not long after. SCP-166 at the age of 12 was seen by a civilian visiting the convent, who reported her existence to the authorities. The Foundation became aware of SCP-166. Clef, wanting the best for SCP-166, exchanged valuable Global Occult Coalition intelligence, documents, and information with the Foundation in exchange for SCP-166's containment and guaranteed safety. It was the best he could do for the girl. Clef then fully defected to the SCP Foundation, where his skills were heavily in demand. Soon, SCP-166 was retrieved from the convent and brought into containment. At least now, Clef could know she was safe. The Cornwall Incident resulted in the termination of the Goddess, and all parties were relieved that the world was rid of this dangerous and mysterious entity. But it also brought Clef a significant amount of strife. Why did he save SCP-166? Why was the battle-hardened and brutal assassin unable to kill her? What connection did Clef share with the Goddess, if any? SCP-166 often wondered about the exact details of her past. She wasn't privy to her history with Clef or all the details of her birth, or what arcane ritual she was born to carry out. SCP-166 only knew the convent, her faith in the Catholic religion, and her life in the custody of the SCP Foundation. During her talks with Chaplain Davis, she often discussed these feelings and desires to know more about herself and her past. The Foundation kept further details about the Goddess and her past under restrictive classifications, and attempts to pry deeper never bore SCP-166 any fruit. One conversation between SCP-166 and Chaplain Davis was particularly noteworthy. Inside the small confessional, where the two met every other week, they exchanged greetings and began talking. SCP-166 enjoyed her talks with Chaplain Davis, which allowed her to explore her faith and further her appreciation of it. It also gave her an opportunity to talk about her feelings and thoughts in an environment similar to the ones she was raised in. To start, Davis reminded SCP-166 that information she gave him could be reported higher up in the Foundation, if need be. In the Catholic religion, confession is a confidential space, but for the SCP Foundation, the rules of the Church are often broken. As usual, I have to remind you that due to our environment, the seal of confession will not take place unless specifically invoked. Even then, details of our conversation can be unsealed if they're determined to be essential. Understand? Davis said. SCP-166 understood and nodded her head. First, SCP-166 asked a question about a replacement for Pope Benedict, who announced his retirement at the time of the interview. Chaplain Davis responded, Yes, that was rather unfortunate. But it does make sense, my child. He was rather old even when he first took up the position. Now he can rest, knowing he served the Church well. SCP-166 was curious to know if a replacement had been decided. Davis informed her that while there was speculation, one had yet to be decided for certain, though he was sure the Church would want to go forward with a fresh, new face to broaden its mission. SCP-166 seemed pleased at this, but Chaplain Davis sensed an underlying discomfort in the girl. She wasn't speaking her true feelings. He assured her that whatever question she had, he could answer to the best of his abilities and without any judgment. SCP-166 decided to speak up. She wanted to know if Chaplain Davis had a good relationship with his parents. Davis sat back for a moment and thought carefully about his response, as he did with all questions that could cause an emotional response in SCP-166. No topic was more sensitive for SCP-166 than the matter of her heritage. Davis informed her that he maintained a good relationship with his mother before she passed away, and a less than happy relationship with his father. Davis asked SCP-166 about her parents, diverting the conversation away from himself. He wasn't sure at this point exactly how much SCP-166 was told or knew. In fact, the Foundation didn't even let Chaplain Davis know the full context of SCP-166's origins. I never really knew my parents, said SCP-166. I got dropped off when I was a baby. I guess they must have known the sisters if they put me there, but I don't remember them, just what I picked up. They mentioned my mother a bit before they realized they should watch what they say about me. I think they said something about her being a goddess, which obviously wouldn't be true. She must have been some sort of spirit, but she must have been something if I ended up looking like this. I remember eavesdropping on the abbess. She was talking to one of the other sisters about how she had done something wrong, something about a ritual that someone else stopped. They said she died. Davis, taken aback by SCP-166's revelations, told the girl that he was sorry for her loss. SCP-166 said that it wasn't like she knew her anyway, so she wasn't bothered by it all that much. Davis asked about her father, but SCP-166 also had little information on him. She said that she had asked the abbess about him multiple times, but she never mentioned SCP-166's father. She wondered if her mother, the goddess, was so horrible. What did her father do that made him unspeakable? SCP-166's questions would not go unanswered. One day, a letter was found inside her containment area. It read, I first met your mother when we were little more than children. She had hooves for feet and starlight in her eyes. She was beauty and nature incarnate, and I killed her with my own 2 hands. Eden isn't a place, it is a state of being. They wanted to take us back to it, and I stopped them. I took paradise away from us for a second time. I've never regretted my actions on that day except one, that when you first met me on that day, you saw your father put a bullet into the head of your mother. I make no excuses, only explanation. You may not have even remembered it, but I'm telling you now in the hope you understand why I did what I did. I hope you forgive me. I love you. I wish I could have done more for you. The best I could do was leave you in the hands of kind and loving people and hope they would raise you in my place. From what I've seen, they did well. I'm sorry you couldn't stay with them. I'm sorry they brought you to this place. I promise to do my best to make sure your stay here is pleasant. I promise to keep you safe. Happy 16th birthday from your loving father, Dr. Clef. Site-19's director, Sophia Light, gave Clef a disciplinary interview for making unapproved contact with SCP-166 and writing such an emotional appeal to the girl. Clef had been barred from talking to SCP-166, and his superiors were even skeptical about letting him work at the same site as her. Light showed sympathy for Clef's dilemma. For 16 years, SCP-166, Clef's daughter, was unable to live her life normally because of who she was. He felt partially responsible. Despite being one of the Foundation's most trusted and powerful agents, capable of sending a strike team anywhere in the world and knowing secrets people would pay billions to know, Clef was unable to talk to his own daughter. In the end, Clef was subject to a minor disciplinary infraction, but the hope that he may one day reunite with his beloved SCP-166 remained. The whole earth seemed to rumble beneath him as Carlos Garcia stood there, standing up at the hulking, shadowy mass towering over him. His knees were shaking, and sweat was running down his face, but he clenched his jaw and stayed put. Furious voices hurled abuse at him from all angles. The stench of gasoline and wood smoke filled the air as the rumbling grew louder and louder. Gripping the camcorder tightly, Carlos pointed it straight up at the enormous excavator that was belching out smoke just feet away from him. Angry men in high-visibility jackets hung off the sides of it, making hand gestures at him and even throwing rocks. But Carlos found, much to his surprise, that his filming hand was steady. He panned the lens across the view in front of him. Excavators, lumberjacks, standing on cut-down tree trunks as thick as motorcycles, and then up into the lush canopies of the Amazon rainforest with its rich, dark green leaves, dense knotted vines, colorful fruits, and terrified ecosystem. Colorful birds watched the scene with nervous eyes, ready to take off at a moment's notice. All of the larger animals had either run away or been killed long before he showed up. Carlos swung the camcorder back down to the mercenaries chopping down his beloved rainforest and jabbed a finger at them.
You will not put your axe to the trunk of one more tree without first cutting me down!
Sick of waiting, the workmen climbed back into their vehicles and started revving their engines. It was all for show, Carlos told himself. That's all it was. They were just trying to scare him, but it was working. He was scared. The excavator in front of him crept slowly forward with tires that were taller than he was. A foot away, 6 inches away, and then an inch away. Carlos closed his eyes and readied himself to be run over, but the pain never came. A whining, chewing noise came from the engine, as if the vehicle was suddenly trapped on something, unable to turn its wheels. Carlos opened his eyes and tried to peer around the edge of the vehicle to see what was going on at the back. There was a new note in the voices of the workmen around him. They didn't seem so angry anymore, more fearful. Carlos went to take a step to see what was going on, but his foot caught and he was trapped. Looking down, he saw that he had somehow managed to lodge his foot beneath a small tree root. He tried to pull himself free, but the grip tightened. All of a sudden, the roots wound tightly around his boots, instantly crushing his foot and breaking every bone inside of it. Carlos screamed, but through the dullness of terror that was filling his mind, he realized no one else would hear him because they were all too busy screaming themselves. The root wasn't just tightening around his foot, now it was pulling him, dragging him. The dirt parted around his crushed foot as the root dragged him down into the earth. It wasn't that the ground was swallowing him. It was that the root was pulling so hard that the ground broke apart around his body. The pressure was unbelievable as first his ankle, then his knee, and then his hip went under. He felt the bones in his pelvis crunching and breaking as his other leg was forced into an unnatural split. It would be good to tell you that Carlos Garcia had a quick death from that point, that he felt no pain as his body was wrenched down into the earth. But no, he died very slowly, in a tremendous amount of fear and pain, as his lungs steadily filled up with earth, and his bones splintered and crunched one by one. One of the most admirable traits of the human race has always been our ability to find a home anywhere. From the Inuit people living in the Arctic Circle, all the way through to the ancient Egyptians building colossal pyramids in the middle of arid deserts, humanity always finds a way to make a home. Anthropologists can look all over the world and find traces of human settlements virtually anywhere. One of the remaining bastions where tribal populations can still exist and flourish is the Amazon rainforest. Life can be difficult and fiercely competitive, but the rich, fertile ground and abundance of food sources have meant that the Amazon has always been home to small human settlements. That is why researchers were so perplexed by the existence of a dark spot within the rainforest. After decades of work, not one trace of human life has been found within this area. For good reason. For a very good reason. Foundation agent Natalie Richards made her way quickly down the stairs, spiraling downwards and downwards. She had never much enjoyed the descent. Something about waking up in the morning and knowing that she would wind up back down here again went beyond the usual Monday blues. It was more insidious. She had barely slept all week. It wasn't just the sticky heat of the barracks at the Paragon South America Forward Operating Site that kept her awake. It was the paranoia. She would just lie there in her bed, experiencing these delusions that at any point, a root would shoot up out of the ground and wrap itself around her neck. It never happened, of course. Their accommodations had been built high up, suspended among the trees away from the site to mitigate any risk. But still, it would always get worse when it was her turn on the observation deck. Down and down she descended through the tower, feeling that horrible, pressurizing feeling that tells you you're going further underground. The air she was breathing down here was filtered by enormous top-of-the-line systems that made sure the air within the tower was clean and fresh. There was an entire department dedicated to the filtration system set up in each of the 4 towers. And yet, she couldn't help imagining that tendrils of fog creeping through the vents to get to her. Suddenly, she was there on the observation deck. She hadn't had time to brace herself, so the view, even though she had seen it dozens of times before, punched her right in the stomach and left her feeling dizzy. On the other side of the glass was a void. The research team had told her that it was 53 kilometers across at its widest point and 42 kilometers at its deepest. Those kinds of numbers meant nothing to her. The reality was that it was darkness, a rotten abyss, open and unending. She was in Tower Charlie, one of 4 observation towers suspended upside down from the roof of the cavern. At the bottom of the tower, what usually would have been the top, was the searchlight. Its beam cut steadily through the abyss like a lighthouse in the dead of night. The beam drifted through empty space. The only way you could even tell it was lit up was the slight haze in the air. Suddenly, the searchlight found its target. Just a branch at first, nothing thicker than a car, snaking its way to join with another and another, growing thicker by multitudes each time, until suddenly the light was shining on the trunk, 380 meters in diameter, 9.2 kilometers tall. The colossal tree hung upside down from the roof of the void, dangling into the abyss. Natalie Richards gulped and tried to breathe deeply so as not to lose her balance. It was her job now to stare at this tree for the next 3 hours. She felt sick. SCP-6666 is a colossal botanical entity that can be found near the coordinates 4 degrees 51 minutes 29.4 seconds south by 67 degrees 44 minutes 12.6 seconds west in the Amazon rainforest. Research has been ongoing for several years to fully map and understand the scale of both the tree itself and the void in which it inhabits. Project Paragon was instituted in an attempt to understand and one day contain the growth of this entity. Above ground, an exclusion zone has been set up covering the area where the roots of this tree have grown through to the surface. A 1-kilometer buffer has been established just outside of the circumference, with a heavily armed security presence patrolling it at all times. Unfortunately, due to the nature of SCP-6666, this buffer zone has to be moved on a normal weekly basis. While samples taken from this SCP seem to indicate that it is totally dead, organically speaking, the root system still possesses a degree of autonomy, being able to move and grow at rates unseen in typical plant species. The roots are capable of breaking through the surface and constricting organic life living above, primarily targeting humans, but also targeting buildings, vehicles, and machinery. It is no wonder then that there is no trace of any human settlements, either contemporary or historical, anywhere near SCP-6666. She knew that the Foundation has been at a loss for progress over the prior few months. Their equipment and resources were deteriorating faster than they were making progress with their research. No one had been down to the floor yet. They were all too afraid to. Descending down through the void, Agent Richard saw something that made her heart drop. Out of the gap in the trunk of SCP-6666 emerged a hand. It clung to the bark with enormous fingers, straining and pulling as the entity dragged itself out from its hiding place. Arm after arm emerged, with one carrying a spear that must have been 20 meters long. 5 arms in total clung to the tree as SCP-6666 surveyed the vehicle flying past it. The entity didn't swipe at the VTOL. It didn't do anything to attack it, but it just watched before slowly turning its face towards Agent Richards in the observation tower. It had 6 eyes arranged into columns running down the length of its face. It had no nose, no mouth, and no ears, but it saw her. It saw her even better than she could see it. She felt panic rising in her chest. Meanwhile, the research team in the VTOL checked their equipment one more time. They had been outfitted with a brand new set of custom pressurized insertion suits, but they weren't stupid. Nothing was 100% safe from reach, and having studied the fog down here for month after month, they knew just how deadly it could be if there was even the slightest contamination. Down and down, the craft descended kilometer after kilometer through utter blackness, until through the front window, they were able to see a thick layer of fog coating the basement of the cabin. The lead researcher stood at the front of the VTOL and gave them one more briefing, emphasizing the importance of moving slowly and safely, not touching anything that could compromise the integrity of their suits, and making sure to collect as many physical samples as possible to take back up to the surface for study. Agent Richards stared at the demon in front of her. Even through the very enforced glass, she could hear the low rumbling of its voice as it spoke to her. Researchers have been trying to understand what language it was for years now, but with no luck. It was either so ancient or so alien that it was beyond their ability to translate. The entity had a name, however. From speaking to researchers on Project Paragon adjacent to SCP-4840, they have been able to name the creature, the Demon Hector, one of 4 primeval entities originating from a long-since lost near-human civilization, millions of years old at least. Who knows? It may even predate the existence of Earth entirely. Of course, we can't simply mention the concept of 4 primeval demons without telling you a little bit about the other 3, some of which you might even recognize. One of them, known as SCP-2254 to the SCP Foundation, is also known as the Demon Lahire. Much like Hector, Lahire is a 6-eyed being of immense power, presiding over his own domain. He is invisible to the naked eye and spends his free time influencing the minds of human beings, when he's not impregnating them with fleshy masses. Next comes the entity known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-4840-B, also known as the Demon Lancelot. Once a brave knight of King Cyrus VIII von Apollyon before being corrupted, this immensely powerful being resides in SCP-4840, the flying city of Autopopodopolis. And rounding out this elite group of mysterious demonic entities comes SCP-6765-D, also known as the Demon Ogier, a horrific cloaked entity that sits atop a throne of blood. It's widely believed these 4 entities were cursed by an unknown and immensely powerful thaumatological being long ago, doomed to hide in ancient places and live until they fulfill their true purpose, playing a part in some known event that will someday compromise all of mankind. And now, Agent Richards was face to face with 1/4 of the apocalypse. Agent Richards stared as the Demon Hector spoke to her. Dozens of kilometers below, the VTOL touched down in the fog. As soon as the deployment doors opened, the thick gas filled the aircraft, obscuring their vision. Turning on their helmet cameras, the researchers stepped out into the unknown as their live feeds were watched by their colleagues on the surface. Smooth stone surfaces covered with etchings swam into view. Some kind of ancient language carved into stone? The remnants of some early South American civilization? No, the researchers on the surface knew immediately that what they were looking at was far too advanced, far too old. Was it? Was it even human at all? A scream filled the control room. A breach in a researcher's suit. The fog that he breathed in contained just a few particles, set the neurons in his brain on fire before shutting down his nervous system entirely in a matter of seconds. The rest of the researchers all ran back to the VTOL in fear, but the fog around them was so dense that they couldn't find it anywhere. It could have been 3 feet away from them, and they would have never even known. One by one, the researchers in the foggy forest dropped dead. On the surface, the research team sighed and closed the video feeds. There was a reason they'd sent them down with live cameras. No one had really expected them to return. And all the while, Agent Natalie Richards stood trembling and watching as the demon Hector hung from the upside-down tree and chanted at her in his impossible language. She didn't care what any of the botanists said. This tree was not dead. The demon readied its spear and leaped at her. Now go check out Children of SCP-001 The Scarlet King. Is SCP-999 really his son? And SCP-001 The Black Moon.